Several hundred years ago, the state of Joseon was located on the territory of modern Korea. There were a lot of people living in this state who were engaged in ordinary everyday things, such as agriculture, fishing, and so on. However, what made this state unusual was that almost all of its inhabitants trained every day to become stronger and develop their physique. Yu Suji was the ruler of this state, and he carefully ensured that the inhabitants of his state became stronger and more resilient every day. Every morning Suji came to his people to supervise how his people were doing their training. Even during their work, many residents did not forget about their training and performed it as carefully as possible. Also, the people of Joseon State had a special place where they trained as hard as they could every morning, and every morning Suji came to this place to supervise the training of his people. There were a lot of exercise machines in this place, which were similar to modern exercise machines, thanks to which the people of Joseon could train their bodies much more effectively. Thanks to Suji, most of the men in Joseon had a strong and pumped-up physique. In addition to training, some men also adopted a special diet to make it easier for them to build their muscle mass. However, not all men found it so easy to pump up their bodies, and many found it very difficult to pump up their bodies. While some men pumped up their muscles with ease, others tried their best not to pass out during training. Many Joseon men found it difficult to endure such training, but they still tried their best to become even stronger. Suji was very proud that his people were becoming stronger and more courageous every day. Several centuries have passed since then, and modern Korea was formed in the place where the state used to be. Choi Young-jik was an ordinary Korean who was actively involved in sports and began to study the history of his country at one of the state universities. Young-jik began training since he went to serve in the army, where there were extremely harsh conditions and strict discipline. During his service in the army, Young-jik began to become very interested in bodybuilding, and after the army he began to study at one of the state universities at the history department. However, even after Young-jik started studying at the university, but he still didn't stop training. Young-jik started going to the gym, watching his diet and leading a healthy lifestyle, and after some time his physique became even more pumped up and strong. After some time, Young-jik was able to earn his athletic certification and decided to celebrate with his friends. That evening, Young-jik and his friends had a good time, and after the celebration everyone went home in a good mood. Soon Young-jik returned home, and he decided to have a little snack and watch a couple of videos on the Manhwa channel recaps before bed. After watching a couple of Young's videos, Jik saw in his recommendation feed a documentary video about the state of Joseon and its ruler Sejong. At one point in the video they said that Sejong lived a very short life, and Young-jik believed that it was because of this that Sejong did not exercise and did not lead a healthy lifestyle. At one point, Young-jik began to fall asleep and think about what would happen if he ended up in Joseon and became a sports instructor there. Then Young-jik began to imagine how he could develop a fighting force in Joseon and thereby rewrite the history of Joseon. Young-jik thought it would be great, after which he quickly fell asleep before he even got to the bed. The next morning, Young-jik woke up when someone started asking him about his cough. The stranger's voice Jik was very soon awakened by the crowing of a rooster. Young-jik didn't understand where the rooster's crowing could be coming from, and he simply decided that he had drunk too much beer last night. By Young-jik tried to wake up, he wanted to pick up his phone, but he discovered that his phone was not nearby. Also Young-jik didn't understand why he woke up not in his apartment, but in a traditional Korean house. However, the strongest one is Young-jik was shocked why, instead of a pumped-up and strong body, he had a very thin and weak body. Meanwhile, the unfamiliar voice continued to tell Young-jik that it was already morning and that it was time for him to get up. Young-jik couldn't believe his eyes, and he decided to open the door of the house, hoping to understand what happened to him. Young-jik opened the door of the house and a man stood next to him and asked Young-jik, "Is his cough gone?" Also Young-jik saw a small courtyard with people in traditional clothes. Young-jik did not understand anything, and he asked the man standing next to him what his name was. At first the man did not understand Young's question Jika, and he told him his name was Suji, and then Young-jik guessed that his father's name was Lee Do. The man then confirmed that Suji's father was none other than Lee Do Sejong, who was the fourth ruler of Joseon. Suji then believed that since his father was known as Sejong the Great, then Suji was the great Prince Jinyang. Based on all this data, Young-jik realized that he had somehow mysteriously ended up in Joseon, and that he was the very great Prince Jinyang. Jinyang couldn't believe that he was actually in Joseon, and he felt that everything seemed too realistic to him. At one point, one of the subjects called Yong Jinyang, and then Yong remembered that he actually ended up somewhere in the middle of the 15th century, when Joseon still existed. Then Jinyang began to get very nervous, since he knew what significant historical figures he would have to see, including the fourth king of Joseon, Sejong. Jinyang began to get more and more nervous, and soon Sejong himself called him to give him a special task, and found himself in the same room with Sejong. Jinyang was simply shocked by what he saw. At this moment, Jinyang saw a very rounded Sejong in front of him, who was having a very hard time breathing, and was not at all like the Sejong that Jinyang had read about in history books in his previous life. Jinyang couldn't hide his surprise, and Sejong simply assumed that Jinyang simply hadn't woken up yet, and hadn't had time to come to his senses. At one point, Jinyang decided to bow down to Sejong just in case, but Sejong himself did not understand what Jinyang was doing. Suddenly, unexpectedly for himself, Jinyang noticed how much the structure of his speech and his vocabulary had changed, and he began to speak the same way as all the inhabitants of Joseon times. Then Jinyang began to ask Sejong for forgiveness for showing such ignorance, but Sejong himself said that he did not hear any ignorance in his son's words. After this, Sejong told Jinyang that he greatly appreciated his talents, and so he asked Jinyang to rewrite the Kangmak, which described all the events in Joseon. Sejong said that in order to carry out this assignment, Jinyang must go to the Chihyunjang Educational Institution, after which Jinyang went to Chipyeongjing. After some time, Jinyang reached Chipyeongjing, where many different scientists usually gather, where they conducted their scientific research. Once in Chipyeongjang, Jinyang thought that if he found himself in this era, he would have to regularly visit this place in search of various historical data about Joseon. One of the visitors to Chipyeongjang told Jinyang that if he could rewrite the Kangmak, he would receive many eulogies, and the people of Joseon would honor Jinyang even more. However, Jinyang told the stranger that Yeom, the Grand Prince of Anpyeong State, had much better handwriting, and the stranger thought that Jinyang was just being a little modest. After a couple of minutes, Jinyang began to study Kanmak, and he was surprised that he not only understood the local speech well, but also perfectly understood the local written language. After a couple of seconds, Jinyang noticed that the Kangmak had very large characters, and he believed that Sejong had some vision problems. Jinyang also applied his knowledge as a sports instructor from a past life, and he concluded that his father Sejong suffered from second-degree obesity, which led him to serious health problems. In addition, Jinyang noticed that even though it was quite cool this morning, Sejong's face was dripping with a lot of sweat. Jinyang then concluded that the fourth king of Joseon, Sejong, suffered from severe diabetes. From his past life, Jinyang knew that with such indicators, Sejong would soon die and leave behind a successor. Sejong's successor will be Jinyang's older brother Lee Hyang, who will receive the title of King Munjang, who will also die soon after the coronation from severe weakening in the body. After King Munjang, Tanjong will sit on the throne, but during his reign, an assassin will break into his royal palace and kill all the representatives of the royal family, including Tanjong himself. Then Jinyang thought that he should never allow Sejong to die so early. Lee Hyang, who was Sejong's eldest son and who was supposed to be the next successor to the royal throne, arrived in Chipyeongjang. Entering Chipyeongjang, I was somewhat surprised that Jinyang was here, since he usually prefers to go to the mountains to hunt. Jinyang believed that Lee Hyang came here for some urgent purpose, but Lee Hyang said that he just wanted to check the current condition of the books that would be sent to Sejong. After that, Lee Hyang headed towards the exit and told Jinyang that he did not want to distract him, and that he could continue to do his own thing. However, Jinyang did not understand how Lee Hyang did not notice that the books that were supposed to be sent to Sejong had too small characters, and he decided to stop Lee Hyang. Jinyang told his elder brother that he would like to read some of these books, but the characters were too small and needed to be rewritten to make them easier to read. Then Lee Hyang felt that Jinyang really had something to add to these books, and he asked Jinyang if he knew that Sejong had presbyopia, or senile farsightedness. Jinyang then told his elder brother that he suspected something similar, but he was not completely sure of his guesses. Then Lee Hyang thought about the transience of life, since before his father very often boasted of his greatness. Then Jinyang asked Lee Hyang when Sejong began to show such symptoms, and Li Hyang said that such deterioration in Sejong's condition began to appear a year ago. Hyang also said that this presbyopia was very different from normal presbyopia, and that Sejong had other symptoms in addition to poor vision, but he asked Jin Yang to keep this information secret. Soon, Li Hyang decided to leave Chipyeongjin, and after he left, several scientists entered the room. Soon, Jin Yang began to feel a slight pain in the back of his head, and he believed that it was because he had been sitting still for too long. Then Jin Yang decided to do a little stretching for his neck to get rid of the pain. First, Jin Yang tilted his head back, after which he began to rotate his head to stretch his cervical vertebrae. After this, Jin Yang stretched his head forward and his shoulders back, and after all these actions, all the pain in the back and back of the head disappeared. At this moment, Jin Yang experienced an incredible sensation of missing pain, while the people who were looking at him did not understand what Jin Yang had just done and why he suddenly felt so good. People did not understand why Jin Yang made such unusual movements, since if he has neck pain, he can turn to a massage therapist. At first, Jin Yang didn't understand why these people were looking at him so strangely, and then he remembered that these people still don't know what stretching is. At that time, people had already begun to practice massage therapy, but at that time it was not very effective, since at that time people did not yet know how human muscles work. Jin Yang then told people that he had recently injured his neck while riding a horse, but after these movements, all the pain in his neck completely disappeared and he immediately felt better. Jin Yang also said that this simple exercise is very good for the neck muscles, and he said that he can easily teach them to do this exercise. After that, everyone sat down at the chairs, and Jin Yang began to show them the correct sequence of movements. First, people threw their heads back as much as possible, after which they began to rotate their heads in different directions. With the last movement, people had to straighten their backs, stretch their heads forward and throw their shoulders back. At first, people did not believe that they could so easily get rid of pain in the neck area, but after all the body movements they had done, they immediately felt extremely pleasant sensations. The next day, Li Hyang went to Jipneojong again, but he was somewhat surprised at the pace of what everyone was doing. Li Hyang did not understand how these people could get rid of neck pain in such an easy way, and without the help of a massage therapist. Soon, everyone in Joseon learned about an exercise that could relieve neck pain, and soon this exercise became known as the stretching whale. However, despite such an effective exercise, Jin Yang still had another headache. To get rid of this headache, Jin Yang went to the local market, where all the necessary ingredients were located. One of the local sellers was extremely surprised that Jin Yang himself deigned to go to the market with ordinary people, since usually representatives of the royal family try not to contact the residents. Jin Yang told the seller that he came here to buy oil such as sesame, but the seller said that he did not have sesame oil, but he did have beef oil. Then Jin Yang handed the money to the seller and asked him to provide him with 5 pieces of beef butter, and that its quality be as low as possible. Suddenly, one of the customers wondered why Jin Yang needed such ingredients as beef oil and several medicinal roots. From his previous life, Jin Yang knew that he was going to die from dermatitis, and he decided to collect the necessary medicines as soon as possible, since in these times, dermatitis was considered a fatal and incurable disease. After some time, Jin Yang bought all the ingredients needed for the medicine, after which he returned home. Soon, a woman appeared behind Jin Yang and said that she noticed how Jin Yang began to increasingly go to the neighboring street. Jin Yang then called this woman his wife and told her that after reading some books in Chipneojong, he decided to try to implement some of his experimental ideas. Then the woman said that she was somewhat worried that Jin Yang now preferred to engage in various despicable work instead of his favorite hunt. Jin Yang told his wife that he was in Jipyeongjiang, and there he found an old book that stated the creation of an invention for washing the body, and he would like to create it. This very invention that Jin Yang wanted to make was ordinary soap, and Jin Yang believed that in Joseon he could not do without it. In the 21st century, people can still experience various skin diseases that are caused by wearing dirty clothes, thereby causing various inflammations. Any dirt such as rust or sweat could also lead to further development of skin diseases. One day Yongjik wanted to try making his own soap, so he turned to the grandmother of the owner of the gym where he worked and trained. The ingredients used were natural olive oil, water and the ash of burnt rice straw, and when all these ingredients were mixed and heated, an excellent soap was produced. Jin Young's wife did not understand how to wash herself with oil, because if the oil gets on the skin, the body will only become dirtier. Then Jin Yang told his wife that thanks to soap, you can not only wash yourself, but also wash away various stains and dirt on clothes, which made the process of washing clothes and washing your body much easier. After that, Jin Yang's wife was silent for a while and moved on, and Jin Yang for a moment thought that his wife was dissatisfied with something, and he felt that his relationship with his wife was very strained. Jin Yang did not dwell on his wife's behavior and went to the kitchen, where he wanted to prepare soap. Jin Yang experimented with the proportions of the ingredients, and after several attempts he was able to achieve the desired foaming. Despite the good foaming, Jin Yang was wondering how effective his soap would be. The resulting liquid began to give off a strong unpleasant odor, and Jin Yang decided that he should try this soap first. Soon the soap-making liquid hardened, and then Jin Yang cut out several pieces of soap and went to test his soap in practice. After this, Jin Yang decided to try the soap in action, and even with some minor shortcomings, the soap cleaned Jin Yang's body and clothes well. Jin Yang especially liked the pleasant smell of the soap, which was obtained thanks to the sesame oil in the soap. At one point, Jin Yang believed that he would be able to establish mass production of his soap and sell it abroad. However, Jin Yang suddenly began to worry about Sejong's current condition, as even Taejong, Sejong's father, had failed to get his son to do anything with his body. Then Jin Yang believed that even if his own father could not force Sejong to solve the problem of his condition, then he certainly would not be able to persuade Sejong to take care of his health. Then Jin Yang thought that if he somehow tried to persuade Sejong to take up sports, then Sejong would probably think that his son was just doing nonsense. Also, Jin Yang feared that otherwise Sejong would send him to Myeongdo or to Lamdo, which are now known as Ulleungdo and Jejudo. When Jin Yang finished washing, he figured that he needed to outsmart Sejong with logic to deal with his obesity. Jin Yang also thought that he himself should lose weight and build muscle mass, and perhaps this could also influence Sejong's decision to go in for sports. At first, Jin Yang planned to do 3 basic exercises, so that over time his muscles and body would become stronger, and so that he could lift 400 kilograms of weight. Jin Yang also thought about making bodybuilding a real science, and writing a book on bodybuilding. Jin Yang was confident that if people began to study bodybuilding and train hard, he would be able to create one of the most powerful states of the 15th century. Jin Yang also believed that if a person tries to bring to an ideal state the body that his parents gave him, then he shows respect to his parents. After washing, Jin Yang went outside where he wanted to start training, and the first thing he wanted to start with was pull-ups. Many people who looked at Jin Yang began to suspect that there was simply something wrong with Jin Yang, and that he had gone crazy. After doing the pull-ups, Jin Yang noticed that this body had a very interesting natural predisposition. After the pull-ups, Jin Yang began weighted arm extensions and curls, and managed to complete this exercise 29 times. After doing arm extensions and curls, Jin Yang began doing push-ups, and he was able to do as many as 82 push-ups in a row. After doing the push-ups, Jin Yang decided to do the dragon plank, and he did this exercise so many times that at one point he just stopped counting how many times he did the dragon plank. Suddenly Jin Yang noticed that even with such a large and sagging belly, he performed all the exercises without any difficulty. Then Jin Yang believed that this was all thanks to the genes of Taejo Lee Songjiwai, the founder and first ruler of Joseon. Soon, Jin Yang finished his training, and at that moment, people came to him and brought him his goods. These people brought Jin Yang several iron dumbbells, with which Joseon could perform even more different exercises. After this, the pleased Jin Yang told the people that he would pay back right now for the fact that these people had made him such excellent dumbbells. Jin Yang received his dumbbells and gave the people 80 kilograms of rice as payment for their work, after which the people looked at the happy Jin Yang with suspicion and moved on. On the way, people were discussing how crazy Jin Yang was, since he gave 80 kilograms of rice for these pieces of iron, because even samurai do not have such an urgent need for so much iron. Then the first man began to worry that Jin Yang was planning to gather an army, but the second man said that they had just done their job and they shouldn't worry about anything else. At this moment, Jin Yang had already started training with dumbbells, since exercises with his own weight were not enough for him to effectively pump his body and muscles. Jin Yang's wife's servant, who saw Jin Yang training, told his wife that there was something wrong with Prince Jin Yang. Jin Yang's wife's servant said that they needed to take some action, but Jin Young's wife said that she didn't want to talk about it. Jin Young's wife's servant continued to talk about how Prince Jin Young first began to cover himself with oil while washing, and now he gave 80 kilograms of rice for an ordinary pile of iron. Also, Jin Young's wife's servants remembered the times when Prince Jin Young used to enjoy hunting with his friends and began to completely ignore his wife. Then Jin Young's wife's servant asked her mistress what she did in her past life that her husband stopped paying attention to her. Then Jin Young's wife again asked her servant to stop talking about it, after which the servant immediately apologized and fell silent. At this moment, Jin Young's wife began to remember with warmth in her heart the times when she and her husband walked around the palace grounds, and how cherry blossoms grew everywhere. During another walk through the palace courtyard, Jin Young gave his wife a cherry blossom branch as a sign of his love and devotion to her. At this moment, Jin Young's wife picked up that same branch to cut it into 2 parts, thinking that every day she was losing her husband more and more. Jin Young's wife cut a cherry blossom branch and told her servants that she would like to go to bed early today, and that she would like to be alone with her thoughts. Jin Young's wife went to wash herself, and next to the candles she saw the soap that Jin Young had made. Jin Young's wife took the soap in her hands, looking at it and trying to understand exactly how they should wash. Jin Young's wife decided to try washing herself with soap, and she began to slowly and carefully rub the soap over her body. Jin Young's wife was surprised at how the soap started producing so many bubbles and how effectively the soap cleaned her skin. After another workout, Jin Young decided to wash himself again, and he thought that at his next workout he should start training with even more weight. Suddenly someone entered the bathhouse, and then Jin Young noticed that it turned out to be his wife. Jin Young was very happy when his wife told him that she liked his soap, which cleaned her body perfectly. The only thing that did not suit Jin Young's wife was that the soap had too much of an oil smell, and she was afraid that people passing by would think that she was the wife of a soap merchant. Then Jin Young thought that he should replace the sesame oil with pork or beef oil, but all these oils were very expensive, which would interfere with the mass production and sale of soap. Then Jin Young's wife suggested that her husband use linseed oil instead of sesame oil, which would make the soap have a more pleasant smell and make its production cheaper. After that, Jin Young thanked his wife, to which Jin Young's wife herself said that it was all nothing, after which she immediately became embarrassed. After this, Jin Young went to a coastal village where one of Jin Young's acquaintances lived. Soon Jin Young reached this village, and there he met the same acquaintance who had been a beater during his last winter hunt. During a hunt, this man was seriously injured when he was attacked by a deer, and that time this man saved Jin Young by taking all the wrath of the angry deer upon himself. Jin Young said that even though a lot of time has passed since then, he still remembers how this man helped him, and Jin Young wanted to thank this man. Jin Young told the man that he would now send his family 2 bags of rice, 2 bottles of sesame oil, eggs, chicken and other food items once every 2 weeks. In exchange for this, Jin Young only asked the man to report to him every 2 weeks information about changes in the height and weight of his children. After this, Jin Young decided to provide similar food support to 20 more villages and begin to record changes in the height and weight of local children. At first, Jin Young wanted to give local residents a protein, carbohydrate and fat diet in order to record changes in the children's physique and their motor abilities. Jin Young also wanted to show Sejong by a clear example how important it is to stick to proper nutrition, so that it would be easier to get him to start taking care of his health. After this, Jin Young went to the local blacksmiths, whom he wanted to ask to make him several things. First, Jin Young showed the blacksmiths a diagram of a training barbell and several iron plates for the future barbell. Jin Young also explained to the blacksmiths that iron plates should be mounted on both ends of the bar, and that each iron pancake should weigh 30 kilograms. The blacksmiths carried out simple calculations and realized that if they made 8 such iron pancakes, then the entire training structure would weigh more than 200 kilograms. Jin Young also said that over time he would need even more of these iron pancakes. The blacksmiths were shocked when Jin Young said that this barbell should be strong and stable enough so that in the future he could lift a weight of 300 kilograms. After that, Jin Young put his hand into his sleeve, pulled out another diagram, and said that he had one more thing to do. Jin Young took out a drawing and asked the blacksmiths to make one iron plate and roll its rod about 3 feet long. Jin Young wondered whether, given the technical conditions of the Joseon era, it would be possible to make a working jokion, a firearm that was previously used in Joseon. On the way home, Jin Yun thought about how he had undergone many positive changes since he arrived in this era. Also on the way home, Jin Yun told one of the blacksmiths with whom he was walking that now with all his heart he wants to restore order in Joseon. At one point, Jin Yang decided to evaluate some of the physical parameters of the blacksmith with whom he walked to the royal estate. Jin Yang was shocked that this blacksmith had a surprisingly very strong and muscular body, to which the blacksmith himself said that he had had such a physique since childhood. Then Jin Yang believed that this blacksmith would be ideal for his first tests, and he invited the blacksmith to become his student on the path of improving his body. The young blacksmith immediately accepted Jin Yang's offer, and did not know how he could thank Jin Yang, to which Jin Yang himself said that there was no need for this. The next day, Jin Yang was going to meet his brother in Chipyeongjong. Soon, Jin Yang met with Li Hyang, and Li Hyang immediately noticed some changes in Jin Yang. Li Hyang was happy that his brother managed to lose weight, and then he asked Jin Yang what he wanted to talk to him about. Then Jin Yang told Li Hyang that his complexion had improved after his new hardening method, and then Li Hyang asked Jin Yang what other new hardening method he was talking about. After that, Jin Yang took out a small box, opened it, and showed Li Hyang his soap, after which he asked his elder brother to try using the soap. After this, Jin Yang and Li Hyang went outside to the same water source, where Li Hyang was supposed to try Jin Yang's soap. After a couple of minutes, Li Hyang was pleasantly surprised at how the soap was able to clean the dirt off his hands so easily. However, when Li Hyang smelled his hands, he told Jin Yang that the oil would make soap production very expensive. Then Jin Yang remembered his wife's words that if in the process of making soap he used tetradium oil along with a couple of handfuls of rice, the production will be cheaper. After that, Jin Yang and Li Hyang returned back to Chipyeongjong, where Li Hyang took out a piece of paper and began to write something down there. Jin Yang picked up a piece of paper on which Li Hyang wrote that he managed to get rid of severe dirt thanks to soap, and that now all officials should wash their hands with soap every day. Li Hyang believed that despite the price of soap, almost anyone could afford it, but due to the unknown nature of soap, no one would buy it in large quantities. Li Hyang also said that first he would like to force all officials to wash their hands with soap, so that in the future they will start washing their entire bodies with soap. In addition, Li Hyang proposed to first start selling soap at private auctions so that he could impose his own tax on it, and thereby receive a new source of income. Then Jin Yang was once again convinced that Li Hyang truly fully justified his status as the future king of Joseon. Meanwhile, the blacksmiths were actively working to create all those items that Jin Yang ordered from them. At one point, one man asked the blacksmith workers if they were sure that Jin Yang ordered exactly what they were doing. Then one of the blacksmiths said that they would face severe punishment if they made even one mistake during their work. However, one of the blacksmiths told all the other blacksmiths that they must right now destroy everything that they had already done during this time for Jin Yang. However, all the other blacksmiths said that they could not do this, since they had already managed to make most of the things for Jin Yang, and that Jin Yang should come for his orders in the coming days. Then this blacksmith told his workers that if money was more valuable to them than their own lives, then they could continue to work on products for Jin Yang. At one point, a man in a black suit and a large hat began to suspect that Jin Yang started all this because he was unable to obtain the right to inherit. Jin Yang really was. The next day, Li Hyang ordered all officials to use the soap that Jin Yang created. Soon, many officials began discussing with each other how they could easily clean ink stains from their hands using soap. People were especially surprised that in addition to ink on their hands, soap also helped remove oil from the skin, considering soap to be some kind of incredible miracle cure. The officials were also very surprised that all this soap was created by Jin Yang, who had never before done such things that were useful to people. Meanwhile, Jin Yang was actively training with new barbells and iron plates for them. The first thing Jin Yang wanted to do was do some bench presses, which were great for pumping up the chest and arm muscles. After a couple of minutes, Jin Yang managed to bench press 10 times in a row with a total barbell weight of 120 kilograms. After the exercises, Jin Yang was amazed that his muscles were developing so quickly, as if the god of bodybuilding himself was helping him. Jin Yang finished doing the bench press, and the blacksmith who was belaying Jin Yang during the exercise told Jin Yang that he was doing a great job lifting such a large weight. Jin Yang believed that even though this barbell was more like the barbells that no one usually uses in the gym, it was still very useful. However, at first Jin Yang had some difficulties in making all these rods and iron plates, since the blacksmiths not only did not have time to complete their work, but also did not cope with the overall design. After Jin Yang finished the exercises, he told his blacksmith that it was his turn to exercise. The blacksmith immediately got scared and told Jin Yang that if he tried to lift this barbell would immediately crush him. Then Jin Yang, with a terrifying look, told his blacksmith that the human body must always develop, and that it constantly needs to be hardened. After a couple of seconds, the blacksmith finally decided to try to lift the barbell, and during the exercise, Jin Yang told the blacksmith that during this exercise he should use both the upper and lower parts of the body. Jin Yang's wife was very surprised by her husband's new transformation, since she believed that her husband was quite slender before, and now his body seemed to shine with strength. Meanwhile, Jin Yang's wife's servants felt that Jin Yang could now be compared to General Wenman. Jin Yang is flattered to be compared to General Wenman, and for a moment, he even forgot that he had to ensure the blacksmith. Then Jin Yang began to tell his wife and her servants about how brave and courageous Wenman was in his youth, and how in adulthood Wenman became one of the best generals in the entire history of Joseon. While Jin Yang continued to talk about General Wenman, the blacksmith could no longer hold the heavy barbell normally. At one point, everyone heard a very loud sound coming from the direction of the door. Later, everyone realized that someone started knocking very hard on the entrance gate. Then Jin Yang headed towards the gate with thoughts of who dared to knock on the gate so unceremoniously. Jin Yang did not have time to approach the gate, and people in dark outfits had already begun to approach from there. Among the uninvited guests was also Captain Li Qi, who was Jin Yang's longtime rival. Jin Yang's wife began to express indignation that these people had broken into Prince Jin Yang's domain, and such bravery greatly frightened Jin Yang's wife's servants. One of the men in dark clothes extended his hand towards Jin Yang's wife, and told her that he knew where he ended up and that he really wanted the woman to shut up right now. At the same moment, Jin Yang ran up to the stranger and pushed him hard away from his wife. The man fell to the ground and was surprised that Jin Yang was able to push him so easily and knock him down. Jin Yang asked the man how he dared to talk to his wife like that. The other men in dark clothes were greatly outraged by Jin Yang's behavior, and then they prepared their swords in case Jin Yang tried to attack them. Then Captain Li Qi came out from behind his subordinates and reminded Jin Yang how they met at last year's hunting competition. Jin Yang recognized Captain Li Qi and he told him that if he dared to harm his people, he would attack Captain Li Qi without warning, after which he asked him why he came here. Then one of Li Qi's men became very angry with Jin Yang for talking to his captain like that, and then Li Qi told Jin Yang that what he was holding was made of 24 swords. Later, Li Qi looked at the rest of Jin Yang's rods, and then he asked Jin Yang why he suddenly needed all these rods. Also, Li Qi's people showed Jin Yang the man with whom he went hunting last year, and now this man was in very serious condition. Then Li Qi believed that Jin Yang was planning to organize a rebellion against his own family with the help of ordinary residents, in order to later become the rightful ruler of Joseon. Then Jin Yang told Li Qi that these were just his personal speculations, and then he said that Li Qi was neglecting his authority since he brought his soldiers to his house. However, Li Qi told Jin Yang that he did not need any proof, as he was fully confident that Jin Yang was planning to organize a rebellion with the help of ordinary people. Li Qi also told Jin Yang that he and his people always act this way and always reach the truth. Then Jin Yang asked Li Qi what would happen if it turned out that he was wrong in his arguments, but Li Qi completely ruled out such an option, and he was confident that he was right. Li Qi also told Jin Yang that until he told the truth, he would torture people from the villages to which he provided supplies. Jin Yang then felt that even if he told Li Qi the whole truth, he would still not calm down, and would continue to try to show his worst side. Jin Yang also thought that after he ended up in this body and in this era, he did not do anything wrong, and he could not know what bad things he could have done before. At that moment, Li Yang came out of the house to try to understand what was happening here. Jin Yang looked at his older brother, and was somewhat surprised that Li Yang looked a little healthier than usual. Li Yang told Jin Yang that he personally came here because some bad rumors had started circulating about him. Li Yang was getting closer and closer to Jin Yang, and then Li Qi asked Li Yang to be careful, since no one knows what a man like Jin Yang can do to him. Then Li Yang asked Li Qi to watch his speech when he called Jin Yang a man. Yang also told Li Qi that Jin Yang was still his own younger brother, and he would like to give him the opportunity to explain the reasons for his actions. Yang also told Li Qi that even though they were brothers, it would not be easy for them to clear their names from such shameful rumors. Then Li Hyang said that if Li Qi did not provide him with strong arguments in favor of his personal guesses, then he would make him greatly regret his words. Jin Yang then told Li Hyang and Li Qi that he would need some help in order to explain his motives. Then Jin Yang asked the blacksmith to bring him the book he was writing, after which the blacksmith left for a while. A couple of minutes later, the blacksmith returned with the book that Jin Yang was writing, and he told everyone that he was writing a book in which he described the teachings of a healthy lifestyle. After this, Jin Yang handed over his book to Li Hyang, who became interested in what was so important that was described in this book. As soon as Li Hyang opened Jin Yang's book, he read that a person should express respect for his parents by caring for the body that was given to him by his parents. However, Li Hyang still could not understand how taking care of his body was connected with all the things that Jin Yang needed. Then Jin Yang leaned in front of Li Hyang and whispered to him that he couldn't say this in front of everyone, and he wanted to tell him everything in private. Then Jin Yang reminded Li Hyang of the grave condition their father was in now. Li Hyang told Jin Yang that Presbyopia had caught up with his father earlier, and he would like to hear from Jin Yang his knowledge of medicine, since he is so worried about their father's condition. Jin Yang then told Li Hyang that their father had recently been dripping a lot of sweat despite the cool weather, and he believed that their father was having bouts of fever. Jin Yang also said that he had some suspicions that their father was showing signs of diabetes, which somewhat surprised Li Hyang himself. Jin Yang believed that Sejong's diabetes developed due to excess yang energy, which was provoked by Sejong's excess nutrition. Jin Yang believed that due to Sejong not engaging in any physical activity, excess yang energy was accumulating in his body, which could directly affect his vision. Then Li Hyang asked Jin Yang why he suddenly began supplying food to the children of ordinary residents of Kosnoa. Jin Yang said that in this way he learned that for simple weight gain it is enough to eat a few spoonfuls of rice and eggs, and his book contains all the reports on nutrition and exercise. Ultimately, Jin Yang wanted to write this book to convince Sejong of what he wrote and persuade him to take up physical activity. Hyang then told Li Qi to recall his soldiers, and Li Hyang said that Jin Yang had absolutely no bad intentions. However, Li Qi refused to withdraw his troops, and he said that he and his men were monitoring the behavior of the citizens of Joseon, and that the king would not like the fact that someone dared to challenge the rights of his soldiers. Li Qi also pointed to his soldiers and said that among them were the most competent inspectors of various ranks, among whom there was even one young official who had only recently joined the ranks of his inspectors. Then Li Qi said that he could not leave here until he knew all of Jin Yang's true intentions. After that, Li Qi took out his fan, extended it towards Jin Yang, and said that if they want to drive them away, then let them start with him. Li Qi also told Li Hyang that he should not cover up someone's intentions just because of his relationship with that person. Li Qi also demanded from Li Hyang that he be firm and show the whole world the greatness of the laws of his country. Jin Yang looked at Li Qi and thought that he became the chief inspector for a reason, and he believed that if some measures were not taken, then this problem would not only affect him and Li Hyang. Then Li Hyang told Jin Yang that he would no longer be able to tell Li Qi, and he asked Jin Yang to explain on his own why he bought all these iron devices. Then Jin Yang told Li Hyang that he was ready to personally show the purpose of all these iron products with the help of his strength. Then Jin Yang once again told Li Hyang that due to excess yang energy, Sejong's vision had deteriorated, but Jin Yang was confident that if Sejong began to harden his body, he would be able to cope with his illness. Jin Yang also told Li Hyang that Sejong showed virtually no physical activity, and he hoped that over time he would be able to interest Sejong to take up physical training. Jin Yang also hoped that he would be able to convince his father to harden his body if Jin Yang showed strength comparable to that of Xiang Yu, a general of the Jin Empire. Then Jin Yang believed that if he could not convince Li Qi and his soldiers of the correctness of his intentions, then he certainly would not be able to convince his father. After this, Li Hyang told Li Qi and his soldiers that Jin Yang was developing methods for healing the human body, and all his iron devices were needed for training the human body. However, Li Qi still could not believe that all these iron objects, each of which weighed more than the heaviest cauldron, were intended for training. Then Li Hyang believed that it was because of all these iron devices that Li Qi came here with his inspection. Then Li Hyang invited Li Qi to show Jin Yang's strength in order to show them the true purpose of all these iron devices in practice, and clear Jin Yang's good name. Then one volunteer came out from the crowd of soldiers and wanted to compete with Jin Yang in strength. The volunteer told Jin Yang that if he lost to him in strength, it would become obvious to everyone that he was lying to everyone. After a couple of minutes, Jin Yan and the volunteer prepared to perform bench presses with the same barbell weight to see which of them would be stronger. Before starting to perform the bench press, Jin Yan explained to the volunteer that this exercise is good for strengthening the arm muscles from the elbow to the hand, chest, and shoulders. However, the volunteer did not accept Jin Yang from fishing, and he believed that everything depended on the strength of the person. Then Jin Yang began to perform the bench press and believed that the volunteer was simply afraid that he would be able to defeat the volunteer. Such words made the volunteer even more angry, which only motivated him more to defeat Jin Yang. It was very difficult for the volunteer to hold the barbell, but he could not give up so easily, since now the honor of the chief inspector was at stake. Then the volunteer put in even more effort to be able to lift such a heavy barbell. After a few seconds, the volunteer still managed to lift the barbell for the first time. After this, one of the soldiers who was ensuring the volunteer wanted to see how Jin Yang lifted the same barbell. At this moment, Jin Yang put a little more effort into lifting the same barbell. The volunteer looked at Jin Yang and grinned at the fact that at first Jin Yang pretended to be so strong, but now he couldn't lift the barbell. However, by that time, Jin Yang had already performed the bench press 8 times, and now he is finishing lifting the barbell for the 9th time. Everyone was shocked that Jin Yang managed to perform so many bench presses in such a short time, and Li Qi was the most surprised. After this, the competition ended, and everyone was completely convinced that Jin Yang actually used his iron equipment specifically for training. At this moment, the volunteer felt very ashamed that he could lose so easily in trying to defend the honor of the chief inspector. Then Jin Yan told the volunteer that nutrition and the amount of training depend on the goal. The volunteer was also very surprised when Jin Yang said that thanks to his diet and training system, he was able to lift weight up to 175 kilograms. The volunteer could not believe what he heard, and he believed that the victory over him simply turned Jin Yang's head, after which he left with Li Qi and the rest of the soldiers. Li Qi and his soldiers headed towards the exit, and Li Qi told Jin Yang that this time they would let them go, but he was still under suspicion. Li Qi also told Jin Yang that he would continue to do his duty, and Jin Yang believed that Li Qi was hinting that he would continue to watch over him. Then Jin Yang told Li Qi that in that case he would also watch him and his soldiers. After that, Li Qi finally left, and Jin Yang was glad that this time they managed to avoid a serious conflict. From then on, Li Hiang began to help Jin Yang complete his book, and then Jin Yang felt that along with one problem, he also received a good opportunity. Jin Yang also believed that if everything had gone differently, he would have found himself in a more hopeless situation. After Li Qi left, Jin Yan apologized to his wife and told her that he would now be more careful and discuss all his future plans with her. Jin Yan wanted to say something else to his wife, but suddenly his legs began to give way, causing him to almost fall. Jin Yang's wife managed to catch her fallen husband and prevent him from falling to the ground. At this moment, everyone, including Jin Yang's wife herself, felt that Mr. Jin Yang was behaving somewhat indecently. After a couple of seconds, Jin Yang was able to get back on his feet, and his wife told him that if he wanted to do this with her, then they should retire to their chambers, after which Jin Yang retired to his wife. That same evening, volunteer Li Qi began to apologize to his captain for failing to defend his honor. Li Qi said that they should not worry about what had already happened, and he told his soldiers that he was able to gain some benefit from what had happened. Li Qi said that among all the metal products of Jin Yang, he was able to notice one interesting thing, which was very similar to a metal tubular weapon. Then Li Qi felt that Jin Yang needed this item for a reason, and Li Qi thought that Jin Yang was going to improve the existing firearms. At last year's hunting competition, Li Qi saw how Jin Yang, without any pity, dealt with one of the prey, like a ferocious and bloodthirsty beast. Li Qi could not believe that the Jin Yang whom he saw then was now busy with issues of improving the health of the human body. That day, Li Qi promised himself that he would personally monitor him in order to later reveal all his true plans. 3 months have passed since then, and one day something happened that Jin Yang could not have expected. That day, Jin Yan was training as usual, and at one point his wife approached him with the news that she was pregnant. Jin Yang couldn't believe what his wife had just told him, and he thought that they had conceived a child that day when they secluded themselves after Li Qi and his soldiers left. At this moment, Jin Yang remembered a moment in his past life when he once again went to a bar with his friend, who told him that he could not go to the gym because he had a 3-year-old son. Then young Jik told his friend that playing sports could greatly change his life for the better, giving him a powerful surge of strength and vigor after each workout. Then friend young Jika asked him if he should listen to advice from a man who had never married in more than 30 years of his life. Then young Jik jokingly told his friend that he had 2 spouses, which were his barbell and dumbbell. Back then, Jin Yang couldn't believe that one day he would actually become a father. Then Jin Yang picked up his wife and couldn't help but be happy that he would actually become a father. Jin Yang was so happy about this news that he wanted to convey such good news to Sejong as soon as possible. Jin Yang's wife was glad that the news of her pregnancy made her husband so happy. First of all, Jin Yang decided to do some simple exercises with his wife so that he could get a rough idea of how childbirth might go. At first, Jin Yang decided to do some simple stretching with his wife to see if his wife would experience fatigue during childbirth, but this was not enough. Jin Yang remembered that in this era, childbirth could lead to death due to some complications, and then Jin Yang felt that he needed to create a disinfectant in time to reduce the risks of childbirth. Within a few days, Jin Yang was able to create sojukori, a special container used to store soju, a traditional ancient Korean alcoholic drink. After this, Jin Yang called a local doctor to see him, to whom he wanted to show his invention. Jin Yang showed the doctor that he first pours alcohol into a container, which passes through a special narrow tube that cools the contents in the container. After this, Jin Yang ordered to bring him all the soju that was in the house in order to test the operation of his device in practice. After a while, Jin Yang was able to extract the alcohol he needed from soju, and he wanted to test the purity of the alcohol. In order to check the purity of the alcohol, Jin Yang took out another container, which was 80% filled with water. The specific gravity of pure alcohol must be 0.8%, and Jin Yang could not allow the container with alcohol to be lighter or heavier than the container with water. After several attempts, Jin Yang finally managed to reach a certain level of alcohol purity, which could mean that he could make a disinfectant. Since Yongjik found himself in the Joseon era, a lot of time has passed, and to return back to his time Yongjik couldn't do it. Every day, Yongjik wondered what happened during the time he was here. However, a few months later, Jin Yan's child was born, and from that day on, he became fully immersed in life in Joseon. The first thing Jin Yang decided to do was tell his father the good news that he finally had a child. Upon arrival, Sejong said that Jin Yang had changed a lot in recent months, and that his invention of soap and disinfectant had greatly changed the life of Joseon. Jin Yang told his father that his father's mercy was limitless, but he still had some way to go. However, Sejong told Jin Yang that he should not be modest, and Sejong told Jin Yang that he would give him 200 nyan of silver as compensation for his expenses for creating the soap. Sejong also told Jin Yang that the birth of his son was the blessing of the entire royal family, and Sejong remembered that thanks to Jin Yang's remedy, his wife returned to normal within a week after giving birth. Sejong then said that from this day forward, Jin Yang's disinfectant should be used in the treatment of newborn children and their mothers after difficult births. At this moment, Sejong looked at Jin Yan and thought that Jin Yan used to be a simple youth, but now he has matured and is benefiting both families and the entire Joseon. Sejong's health deteriorated greatly, making it suddenly difficult for him to breathe. Within seconds, Sejong fell from his throne, and his subjects immediately called doctors to try to bring King Sejong back to his senses as quickly as possible. That same evening, Li Hyang told Jin Yang that their father's condition had worsened, but this time Sejong was still able to come to his senses, but he was still worried about his condition. Li Hyang also told Jin Yang that Sejong is now constantly thirsty, and his eyesight has deteriorated so much that he now has to hold a book right in front of his eyes to read something. Li Hyang also said that doctors are now giving Sejong a special healing decoction, but it does not have any effect. Then Jin Yang asked Li Hyang if his father had told him that he could see flying insects, or a whitish fog. In Yong's past life Jika had a grandfather who suffered from diabetes, and who had similar symptoms to Sejong, sometimes complaining about seeing insects, or cloudy fog. However, Li Hyang told Jin Yang that Sejong did not complain of such symptoms, and he only said that he had difficulty seeing things in the distance. Then Jin Yang told Li Hyang that in this case the situation was not critical, and he believed that now Sejong was simply experiencing a slight malaise, which was caused by ordinary overwork. Then Jin Yang believed that if King Sejong's condition continued to deteriorate, then within a year he would completely lose his sight. Jin Yang also remembered that September would soon come, and his mother's birthday would be celebrated in September, and he thought that this would be an extremely good opportunity to influence his father. Li Hyang believed that Jin Yang was planning to do something grand at the royal feast. Jin Yang told Li Hyang that his book only described 3 exercises using heavy weights. Among these 3 exercises, Jin Yang described the squat, bench press, and deadlift in his book. During a deadlift, Jin Yang should try to lift a barbell with a very heavy weight to waist level. Then Jin Yang calculated that by his mother's birthday he should reach 400 kilograms in these exercises. Li Hyang he was shocked that Jin Yang seriously decided to lift 400 kilograms of weight at his mother's birthday. Li Hyang then told Jin Yang how he had recently asked one of Joseon's most experienced soldiers to lift 600 kilograms. However, a barbell with such weight turned out to be too heavy for the soldier, and he was unable to lift the barbell. Jin Yang said that at the moment he is not able to lift 900 kilograms of weight, and to lift 400 kilograms he needs to try hard. However, Jin Yang believed that he should put in all his efforts to become strong enough to lift 400 kilograms of weight, and for the sake of his father. Hyang then told Jin Yang that he would also help him, and he said that his book described too many things that would be difficult for an ordinary person to understand, and he would try to make his book more understandable. Hyang also told Jingtian that he would try to improve his younger brother in his studies. Jin Yang was afraid that in addition to writing the book, he also had to improve his teaching. Li Hyang reminded Jin Yang that he himself had written about honoring his parents, and Li Hyang said that his book should contain at least 13 sutras, the Confucian precepts of the Ming dynasty. Jin Yang felt that it would be extremely difficult for him to raise the level of his teachings, since the only scriptures he had once read were the 5 classics. However, Jin Yang believed that all this should help his father understand even more the importance of a healthy lifestyle. Jin Yang then told Li Hyang that from that day on, he would try not only to lift 400 kilograms, but also to raise the level of his teachings. Then Li Hyang said that he would definitely ensure that their father became interested in Jin Yang's book and understood it. After this, Jin Yang and his brother Li Hyang immediately drank and ate in the name of their father's health. The next day, Jin Yang began to think about how he should prepare to lift 400 kilograms for his mother's birthday. Jin Yang also thought that if he himself did not try to lose all his excess weight, then he would definitely not be able to convince his father to think about leading a healthy lifestyle. Then, before starting his attempts to lift 400 kilograms, Jin Yang decided to first get rid of 8 kilograms of his excess weight. Then Jin Yang believed that in the conditions of this era of smama, an effective way to lose excess weight is to climb a mountain. Jin Yang began to climb the mountain with Li Hyang, who hoped with all his heart that Jin Yang would actually be able to lift 400 kilograms on his mother's birthday. Soon, the Jin Yang finished their climb up the mountain, and he immediately began to raise his level of teachings. Jin Yang began to read a book with various teachings, and he did not understand how he would be able to learn everything that was described in this book. Then Jin Yang remembered Li Hyang's words that he managed to learn all these teachings in 2 weeks. He believed that with such talent, Jin Yang could learn these teachings in a week. In order to lose weight, Jin Yang also changed his diet, replacing it with cabbage, cucumbers, red tofu, and oatmeal. Jin Yang's wife was surprised that her husband would actually eat this and modest foods for a long time. Then Jin Yang told his wife that at his mother's birthday he was going to show all his respect to her and to his father. Jin Yang also said that if he had less fat in his body, he would be able to achieve this goal even faster. After a couple of seconds, Jin Yang started eating and said that he had everything he needed to achieve his goal. Jin Yang's wife apologized to her husband because she again failed to understand all of his plans. At one point, Jin Yang paused before eating when his wife told him that she had decided to add a little salt to his tofu so that it wouldn't taste too bland. Jin Yang's wife called the servants over and ordered them to remove all the food from Jin Yang's table and prepare all his food again. Also, Jin Yang's wife ordered the servants to carefully check her husband's food from that day on, so that all of Jin Yang's food would always be fresh. For a long time, Jin Yang continued to train hard, lifting more and more weight every day. Jin Yang also continued to try to get rid of excess weight by climbing mountains with Li Hyang, and every day they climbed higher and higher. In between training sessions, Jin Yang also did not forget to increase his level of teachings, memorizing more and more wisdom each time. At one point, Jin Yang and his brother were able to climb to the very top of the mountain that they climbed together every day. Jin Yang looked down at Josian and thought only that the time he had spent on all this had passed too quickly. Soon the birthday of Sejong's wife arrived, to which a lot of guests came. There were a lot of people at the birthday party who entertained Sejong and his wife in every possible way. Sejong's wife was very pleased with how people could ride horses in such an unusual way. Sejong himself pretended to like everything, but in reality he could not properly see everything that was happening around him. Jin Yang was scheduled to perform last, and he asked Li Hyang if he had discussed his performance with anyone else. Li Hyang told Jin Yang to the crown princess that Jin Yang plans to lift 300 kilograms, which only made the crown princess angry and didn't believe what was said. Then Li Hyang asked Jin Yang to be sure to carry out his plans, and in this case, their mother might also be interested in teaching a healthy lifestyle. Hyang also told Jin Yang that he was counting on him very much, after which Jin Yang went to show the public the capabilities of his body. Soon it was Jin Yang's turn to wish his mother a happy birthday. Jin Yang bowed his knee in front of his mother and began to congratulate her on her birthday from the bottom of his heart. Jin Yang also told his mother that he owes her everything he had before, what he has now, and what he will have in the future. Meanwhile, several subjects tried to hold iron plates in their hands, which they would then have to place on a barbell. Jin Yin also told his parents that he would like to demonstrate to them his teachings on a healthy lifestyle, which describe methods for healing and improving the body. Sejong noticed that there was a lot of iron behind Jin Yang, and he asked Jin Yang what he was going to do with all these iron things. Jin Yang told his father that all this was just a small performance that he would like to repay his parents with. After that, Jin Yin took off the canvas and told his parents that today he would like to demonstrate to them the capabilities of his body, which they gave him at birth. At this moment, the entire royal guard was shocked by how strong Jin Yang seemed. At this moment, Jin Yang's servants had already managed to place the required number of iron plates on the barbell. The first thing Jin Yang planned to do was bench press, but no one understood what Jin Yang wanted to do. At this moment, Jin Yang was being observed by Li Qi and his undercover soldiers, and they noticed that the barbell had become several times larger and heavier since their last meeting. Meanwhile, Jin Yang had time to prepare to perform a bench press, after which he removed the heavy barbell from the support racks. After a few seconds, Jin Yang was able to lift such a heavy barbell almost effortlessly. Everyone who looked at Jin Yang was shocked that Jin Yang was actually able to lift such a heavy barbell. After the exercise, Jin Yang put the barbell back on the support stands, after which he turned to his parents. Jin Yang told his parents that they were now watching the bench press, one of the most important exercises in his book, which allows you to pump and strengthen the muscles of the chest, shoulders and arms. Jin Yang's mother told her son that she did not fully understand what she had just seen. After that, Jin Yan was asked how much all this iron weighed, and Jin Yan said that in total all this iron weighs 280 kilograms. Sejong and his wife were shocked that Jin Yang was actually able to lift so much weight. Soon, several more people approached the bar with iron plates for Jin Yang's next exercise. After a couple of seconds, Jin Yang's servant placed another couple of weights on Jin Yang's barbell, which made the barbell begin to weigh even more. Jin Yang's next exercise was the barbell squat, during which he must use the strength of his legs to successfully complete the exercise. Jin Yang also said that this exercise perfectly pumps and strengthens the muscles of the legs and lower back. Jin Yang's mother was afraid that Jin Yang was planning to do this exercise with even more weight, and she asked her son to stop. However, Jin Yang had already managed to pick up the barbell, and he said that this barbell now weighs 340 kilograms. After that, Jin Yang slowly began to squat, which this time turned out to be somewhat harder than the previous exercise. Soon, Jin Yang squatted down completely, and all he could do was stand up again with the heavy barbell on his shoulders. After a couple of seconds, Jin Yang began to rise up again with a heavy load. As a result, Jin Yang was able to perform such a difficult squat again with even heavier weight. Sejong and his wife were shocked that Jin Yang also managed to lift such a heavy barbell. After this, Sejong called one of his servants to him, and asked him how this was even possible. Sejong's servants suggested that this was all thanks to the book that Jinyang was writing. At this point, Jinyan said that he would now show the most difficult exercise that is described in his book, namely the deadlift. Jinyang said that during this exercise he would use his heaviest weights, while Jinyang's servants tried to carry the heaviest iron plates to the barbell. Before Jinyan started demonstrating the deadlift, Li Hyang told his father that he was a little worried that Jinyan might hurt his back during this exercise. Then Li Hyang picked up a special belt for deadlifts and said that in this exercise it is necessary to use additional means of protecting the back from sudden injuries. After that, Li Hyang walked over to Jinyan and pulled a special deadlift belt on him. Before doing the deadlift, Jinyang said that the barbell now weighs 400 kilograms. Jinyang also thanked his parents again for giving him such a capable body, and he said that he would continue to take care of it and improve it. At this point, one of Li Qi's soldiers told his captain that, against Jinyang's standard training, his statements should indicate Jinyang's lack of sanity. Meanwhile, Jinyang believed that if he had not been on a diet, then managing such weight would have been somewhat easier. Jinyang also believed that even with a belt it would be extremely difficult for him to cope with such weight. Then Jinyang leaned towards the barbell, grabbed it as tightly as possible, and prepared to demonstrate his deadlift. A second later, Jinyang concentrated all his strength on the barbell, tensing all his muscles. Jinyang tried with all his might to lift the heavy barbell off the ground, but in the first seconds Jinyang was unable to lift the barbell steadily. After a couple of seconds, Jinyang still managed to put in more effort and lift the extremely heavy barbell off the ground. Captain Li Qi and his soldiers could not believe that a person was even capable of something so heavy. Even though Jinyang managed to lift the barbell, his arms were under so much tension that they immediately began to bleed. But despite all this monstrous load, Jinyang was able to hold the barbell in his hands. At one point, Sejong's wife was so shocked by what her son was able to do that she briefly lost consciousness. After a few minutes, Jinyang placed the barbell on the ground, causing the brick road under the barbell to begin to crumble a little. All the spectators were still in shock that Jinyang was able to pump up his body so much that he was able to withstand such a huge load on the body. After Jinyang showed everyone his exercises, Sejong's wife suddenly stood up from her seat. At first, Jinyang didn't understand what his mother wanted to do, and then she just silently walked up to Jinyang. After Jinyang's mother approached her son, she grabbed his hand to see what had happened to them during his entire training. Jinyang's mother was deeply touched that her son had gone to such great lengths to show her and Sejong his respect for them. At one point, Jinyang's mother could not hold back her tears, after which she immediately began to cry. Following Sejong's wife, the girls who served Sejong's wife immediately began to cry, since they had never seen such sincere emotions of Sejong's wife before. At this moment, one of the spectators said that before, he had only heard that people who study martial arts also become as big as Jinyang's abdominal muscles. Sejong then told Jinyang that he was truly amazed at how his son was able to strengthen his body so much. Sejong also asked Jinyang what inspired him to write his book on improving the health of the human body and continue to further develop this idea. Jinyang said that his parents had given him an extremely amazing body, and so he decided that he should now take good care of his body and continue to develop it. Sejong then asked Jinyang if lifting 1,000 pounds was necessarily the norm, since he was worried that not everyone would be able to lift something that heavy. However, Jinyang said that he first started training just to get rid of excess weight, and as he did these exercises, his strength began to increase naturally. Jinyang also said that thanks to the training, his movements became smoother, and his constant fatigue almost completely disappeared. After this, Sejong told Jinyang that he would look at the book that Jinyang wrote with his brother. Sejong also told Jinyang that he would definitely discuss his book with him after he fully read his book. At this moment, Jinyang was happy that he finally managed to entice his father into the topic of a healthy lifestyle. Sejong also said that he was somewhat unhappy with Jinyang's current name, and he said that he would now have a new official name. From that day on, Jinyang now had a new official name, Grand Prince Seong, in which Su meant head. Towards evening, Li Hyang handed the book to his younger brother Zhejiang, who at first thought that Suyang's book was somewhat extraordinary. Sejong also asked Li Hyang where Suyang had such knowledge about methods of healing the human body that he was able to write his own book about it. However, Li Hyang told Sejong that he himself was surprised at how detailed and intelligibly Suyang was able to describe all the training methods in his younger brother's book. Hyang also told Sejong that in his book Suyang had thought of using something he called a table, which had not previously been found in any book in all of Joseon, which interested Sejong very much. Sejong started reading Suyang's book, and it described all the research on eating habits, exercise, and other factors of a healthy lifestyle. The book said that if you cook 6 kilograms of rice, it will be enough to feed one adult for 10 days, while children will be fed for 20 days. However, the book described that excessive overeating can lead to several complications in the body, such as excess weight and decreased muscle mass. The book also stated that if you add 1 spoon of sesame oil to a child's daily diet, his body will always be full of strength and energy. However, with such a diet, the child will gain 300 grams of fat per month, after which Sejong looked at his plump body and thought about something. The next day, Li Hyang came to Suyang, and Suyang asked his elder brother what his father said about his book. Li Hyang told Suyang with a smile on his face that his father wanted to study Suyang's teachings, which made Suyang very happy. The joyful Suyang told Li Hyang that he had already prepared all the supplies necessary for Sejong for his first training. Happy Suyang wanted to start training with Sejong as soon as possible, since first he was going to teach him to hold the correct position while doing the exercises. However, Li Hyang told Suyang that Sejong was somewhat busy right now and that he would like to discuss things a little later, which surprised Suyang somewhat. In fact, Sejong simply walked around the territory of the royal estate, regularly asking the servants to bring him jokyeon, a Korean toffee diluted in water. Then Suyang decided that if Sejong was not going to come to the training on his own, then Suyang himself would come to him with all the necessary items and his book. After that, Suyang grabbed several rods and ran to the royal estate, and then Li Hyang also wanted to go with his brother. After some time, the royal guards noticed Suyang just kneeling in the middle of the royal court, and they told him that he shouldn't behave like that. However, Suyang said that he was not going to leave so easily, and he told the guards that they could try to drive him away on their own. Then the guards tried to lift Suyang and take him away, but they failed to raise Suyang. Soon Sejong arrived at the scene and demanded an explanation of what was happening here. Sejong also began to threaten the guards and Suyang that if something like this happened, he would personally rip the skin off their faces. However, Suyang approached Sejong and told him that they needed to discuss something together. Sejong thought that Suyang wanted to talk to him about his book, and he told Suyang that he had read it and that he would like to try the exercises a little later. First, Suyang thanked his father for his generosity, after which he said that they should start studying from today and continue studying further. Suyang insisted that Sejong start studying with him now, but Sejong himself firmly insisted that he was busy now and that he would like to start studying later. Sejong also began to suspect that Suyang wrote this book solely because he knew about Sejong's illness. Suyang said that all of Sejong's symptoms had already become extremely noticeable, and he believed that Sejong should recover from it as soon as possible through exercise. Sejong then asked his royal physician what symptoms Suyang was talking about, and the doctor said that Suyang was most likely talking about King Sejong's constant thirst and excessive sweating. Then Suyang believed that Sejong consulted a doctor precisely after his book, since it was after reading it that he began to worry about his health, but he still rejected physical exercise. Then Suyang decided to scare Sejong a little and said that he suspected Sejong of diabetes, and he decided to bring his body to the state of a person who suffers from this serious illness. Then Sejong was very surprised by what Suyang had just told him about diabetes. Suyang told his father his idea so seriously that even Li Hyang for a moment believed Suyang's words that he had conducted such experiments on himself. Diabetes is a serious disease that occurs due to excessive overeating, and high-calorie foods such as sweets or baked goods only contribute to the development of this disease. Suyang drew attention to the fact that Sejong drinks choshin too often, which is most likely the main cause of diabetes and its further development. The main causes of diabetes are continuous thirst and excessive fatigue, which can cause a person to suddenly fall asleep. Suyang then told Sejong that he was showing all the primary signs of diabetes. In fact, Suyang lied to Sejong a little about how he was trying to get diabetes through training, and at that moment even Li Hyang believed his words. Sejong then asked Suyang how long it would take to completely get rid of diabetes and its symptoms. Suyang told Sejong that it would take 6 months of hard training to get rid of diabetes. Then Sejong said that he would try to do physical exercises, and if there was no change in 6 months, then he would punish Suyang for deceiving the king. Suyang agreed to Sejong's terms, after which they went to train together. First of all, Suyang decided to give Sejong a little warm-up in the form of horse riding. While riding a horse, Sejong found it very difficult to sit with his back straight. Sometimes Sejong began to slouch, and Suyang constantly reminded him to keep his back straight. Sejong could not look at such a stern expression on Suyang's face, because if Sejong leaned over even a little, then Suyang would immediately show his dissatisfied face and point out to Sejong his mistakes. During this training, Sejong only dreamed of finishing this exercise as soon as possible. An hour after starting the exercise, Suyang told Sejong that he could finish this exercise, which made Sejong very happy. However, Suyang told Sejong that this exercise was just a small warm-up before the main exercises, which made Sejong very upset. After horse riding, Suyang told Sejong to do barbell squats. Sejong that this exercise was even more difficult than riding a horse, which made Suyang look at his father more and more sternly, pointing out his mistakes when performing the exercise. During the barbell squat, Suyang gave Sejong tips on how to properly perform the exercise, such as the required number of repetitions, leg and back position. After a few exercises, it was time for lunch. Sejong was incredibly happy that he would finally be able to eat and regain his strength. Sejong was brought rice, oatmeal, tofu and other foods that Suyang ate during his training. Sejong was very disappointed with his lunch today, as he was already used to eating various delicious dishes every day. The first thing Sejong decided to try was rice, but it seemed to him that the taste of rice was more like horse feed. Then Sejong decided to stop eating what they brought him, after which he called his cook to him. Soon, Sejong's personal chef arrived, and Sejong then began to express his dissatisfaction with him about his food today. Then Sejong demanded that they bring him what they usually cook for him, and throw what was now on the table to the horses. Meanwhile, Suyang watched his father from the side and listened as Sejong began to complain about his food today. After a couple of seconds, Suyang looked at Sejong again with his intimidating gaze and asked him why he refused to eat the food that was just brought to him. Sejong was scared by his son's sudden appearance in the room, and Suyang explained to his father that he himself asked the cook to prepare such food. Suyang also said that in order to control sugar in the body, he also asked the cook and the rest of the servants not to pour Sejong any more jokian, to make it easier for Sejong to lose weight. However, Sejong was still dissatisfied with his food, as he thought that these dishes tasted very bad. Then Suyang himself reminded Sejong that he himself had promised to follow his instructions for 6 months. Suyang also recalled one of the Confucian teachings, which said that for a noble man, any promise he makes should be even more valuable than life. Then Suyang showed Sejong all his dissatisfaction with the fact that his father could not follow such a simple thing as a proper diet. Then Sejong calmed down a little and continued to leisurely eat his lunch, all thinking about how Suyang could be so stubborn and expedient. After one of his regular workouts, Sejong went to his bedroom to do some work. However, Sejong was so tired after another training session that his hand was constantly shaking from tension, which made him unable to write on paper normally. Due to the constant tension in his hands, Sejong had already ruined several sheets of paper, but he still tried to write normally. That evening, Sejong thought only that after 2 weeks of hard training he had not achieved any result. At this moment, Sejong suddenly became hungry, and he ordered his servant to bring him his night meal. However, at that moment, instead of the servants, Suyang arrived to Sejong, who again looked at Sejong with his creepy and cold gaze. Sejong was very frightened by such a sudden appearance of his son, which is why Sejong thought that now he would simply die of fear. Suyang then apologized to his father, and told him that he just wanted to check on him and make sure he was okay. A few seconds later, Suyang left Sejong's bedroom, who at that moment thought that now this cold gaze of Suyang would appear in his nightmares. Soon Sejong decided to go to bed, and he began to somewhat regret that he agreed to these trainings, since because of them he could not normally carry out his government duties. Sejong soon fell asleep, and the guards who stood at the entrance to Sejong's room were very surprised that for the first time in a long time, Sejong stopped snoring in his sleep. At this moment, Sejong had a dream in which he still managed to strengthen his body in the same way as Soo-young once did. It's been a month since Sejong started following a healthy lifestyle. One day Soo-young decided to contact Chan Young-silyu, who was an inventor at the royal estate. When Soo-young arrived at Chan Young's place, he saw that Chan Young was sleeping right at his workplace. Soo-young was also somewhat frightened by the unusual wooden doll that stood on Chan Young's desk. After a couple of seconds, Soo-young noticed that Chan Young began to become delirious in his sleep. However, after a second, Chan Young raised his head, looked at his head and continued to rave. Soo-young felt that Chan Young had some mental problems if he was talking to a doll, which made him feel a little awkward watching Chan Young. Meanwhile, Chan Young was still delusional, and his behavior became more and more creepy with each passing second. At one point, Soo-young finally decided to try to talk to Chan Young, who did not expect that there was someone else in the room with him. Then Chan Young apologized to Soo-young for his impartial appearance, and politely asked Soo-young about what issue Soo-young came to him. From his past life, Soo-young remembered that Chan Young was a true genius of his time who made invaluable contributions to the life and development of Joseon. At one point, Soo-young felt that the Chan Young he was looking at right now was very different from the Chan Young he had read about in his previous life. Soo-young decided not to pay attention to Chan Young's mental state, and then he told Chan Young that he would like to ask him to make one device for him. Soo-young also handed Chan Young his drawing and said that the emperor himself wanted Chan Young to create this device. However, Soo-young said something wrong, which instantly caused Chan Young to become extremely hysterical. Soo-young didn't understand what he did wrong, while Chan Young continued to scream. Soo-young then asked Chan Young if he knew about his book on living a healthy lifestyle. And then Chan Young said that there are literally no people left in Joseon who don't know about his book. Young also said that he saw with his own eyes how Soo-young lifts a monstrously heavy barbell. Then Soo-young believed that Chan Young was probably aware that Sejong had begun to independently study health promotion techniques. But due to the upcoming cold weather, the king would not be able to train outside. Then Soo-young showed Chan Young his drawing and said that he would like Chan Young to assemble special stilts for Sejong that would simulate a real run. Chan Young said that he had not worked with such structures before, and he told Soo-young that it could take up to several years to create such a device. At this point, Soo-young realized that it would be difficult for Chan Young to design a device similar to a modern treadmill. Then Soo-young told Chan Young that when he began to strengthen his body, he also experienced a lot of difficulties and torment. Soo-young also said that every time he tries to imagine Sejong going through the same torment, his heart becomes heavy, and then he said that they should not count on this path yet. At first, Chan Young thought that this device should help strengthen the body, to which Soo-young said that along with the growth of skills, the weight with which one has to strengthen one's body also increases. Soo-young also said that when he himself was just starting to strengthen his body, he repeatedly felt unpleasant sensations such as pain in his arms, legs and stomach, and Soo-young was still uncomfortable with these sensations. Then Chan Young considered that using such a treadmill could provoke even more unpleasant sensations. Then Chan Young said that he would like to refuse to create something like that, but if King Sejong and Prince Soo-young himself want this, then he must create this device as soon as possible. At this moment, Chan Young immediately became eager to quickly study Soo-young's drawings, who was surprised that just a minute ago Chan Young said that it would take several years to create this treadmill. A minute later, Chan Young began to study Soo-young's drawing, thinking about how it would be better to change the design, and what materials should be used for this. A couple of minutes later, Chan Young offered Soo-young his version of a device for simulating walking, which was somewhat similar to a wheel for domestic hamsters. Then Soo-young asked Chan Young how many months it takes to create such a structure, and Chan Young said that if you don't focus on unnecessary decorations, it will take no more than 10 days. However, Chan Young still believed that creating this design would require a lot of effort, and then Soo-young said that he was ready to help Chan Young with creating a training wheel. After 10 days, Soo-young and Chan Young were able to create a working training wheel, and the first thing Soo-young wanted to do was demonstrate the new training wheel to Li Hyang. Despite the reliable design, Li Hyang was worried that this wheel was not tested, and he believed that Sejong would be the one to test this wheel first. However, Soo-young told Li Hyang that after assembling the wheels, he decided to test them in practice, and they turned out to be reliable enough to be easy to practice with. However, Li Hyang meant that he believes that this wheel should be tested by someone who has never trained before, so that one can understand whether such people can train in this wheel. Then Suyang told Li Hyang that he knew just one such person on whom this new simulator could be tested. Li Hyang thought that his younger brother was talking about him, and he told Suyang that he should no longer joke like that. However, Suyang, with all the seriousness of his gaze, showed Li Hyang that he was not going to joke, and then Li Hyang tried to explain to Suyang that he could not endure physical activity consistently. As a result, Suyang still managed to force Li Hyang to try a new simulator, which was very difficult for Li Hyang to train on. During such a run, it seemed to Li Hyang that he had been running for an hour, but Suyang said that Li Hyang had only run for 15 minutes, which made Li Hyang very upset. After running in the wheel, Suyang sent Li Hyang to do the bench press, but Li Hyang himself could not understand why he had to do this exercise. At this moment, Suyang said that he was somewhat saddened by the fact that his elder brother, who also had a very strong and resilient body, could not put in enough effort. At that moment, when Li Hyang was able to perform 12 bench presses, Suyang ordered him to do 3 more bench presses, which really annoyed Li Hyang, since this was not the first time Suyang forced him to do the exercise 3 more times. Suyang said that he first looks at the workload of the muscles, after which he can better understand how many times he needs to do the exercise, to which Li Hyang only said that Suyang should learn to count. After the bench press, Suyang told Li Hyang to squat the barbell 8 times, and Li Hyang asked Suyang if he would also make him do the exercise a few more times. Suyang told Li Hyang that his calculation method was highly dependent on Li Hyang's muscles, and if he was not adjusted correctly, he would not be able to strengthen his body. During the exercise, Suyang repeatedly pointed out Li Hyang's incorrect movements during the squat, such as bowed knees or a bent back. At one point, Li Hyang simply could not stand it and cried, asking Suyang to again become the same kind person as he was before. However, Suyang said that for the sake of his brother's health, he was ready to become even angrier, and then Suyang told Li Hyang that from that day on he would also study his methods of improving health. The next day, Suyang trained with Sejong, who was running on a wheel. Suyang was surprised that even though Sejong almost lost his breath at the beginning of the exercise, he still continued to run for more than 15 minutes. Suyang also noticed that Li Hyang also performed well in training, and he believed that the physical abilities of the royal family were simply amazing, and Chan Young's contribution was simply invaluable. At one point, Chan Young asked Suyang to tell him a little more about the methods of strengthening the body so that he could improve the simulator in every possible way. Soon, Suyang told Chan Young some information, and during the conversation, Suyang realized that despite the fact that Chan Young went down in history as a brilliant inventor, in reality he turned out to be an eccentric. Then Suyang came to the conclusion that in fact Chan Young turned out to be an ordinary workaholic who was very devoted to his work. Some time after Sejong began training, some ministers began to suspect that the disease had already overtaken Sejong. Also, some ministers did not like the fact that since Sejong began training with Suyang, he devoted all his time to training, completely forgetting about government duties. At this point, Li Hyang was approached by Sejong's doctor, who suspected that King Sejong's diabetes was rapidly developing, and that Sejong's body had been severely emaciated over the past 3 months. However, Li Hyang tried to reassure the doctor by telling him that Sejong began to lose weight after Suyang's training, just like him and Suyang. Then the doctor reminded Li Hyang that Suyang himself said that rapid weight loss indicates progressive diabetes. Then the ministers began to be indignant at Suyang's methods and believed that these methods were not at all effective, and that they should urge people to abandon these methods right now. At that moment, King Sejong came out in front of the ministers, who right now wanted to know what these people were arguing about. The ministers could not believe their eyes how King Sejong was able to change so much for the better. Then the ministers told Sejong that it was time for them to go about their business, so as not to accidentally run into a conflict with Sejong. At that moment, Li Hyang approached Suyang and told him how the ministers began to think that Sejong's illness was continuing to develop due to his training. However, Suyang told Li Hyang that they had nothing to worry about, and that Sejong's medical records showed excessive sweating with minimal fluid intake. The doctor wanted to tell Suyang that all the signs had already begun to appear, to which Suyang said that only 3 months had passed, and that they needed another 3 months to finally be sure of everything. Soon, severe frosts began in Joseon, during which a lot of snow began to fall on the ground. Suyang looked at the sky and thought only that with every day he lived, his past life seemed more and more like a dream to him. At this moment, Inspector Li Qi approached Suyang, who wanted to talk to Suyang personally. The inspector, with a good-natured expression on his face, pointed out to Suyang that he had arrived at the estate very early. In response, Suyang also decided to ask Li Qi why he also decided to come to the estate at such an early hour. Li Qi told Suyang that Sejong has been unable to fulfill many government obligations recently due to excessive fatigue, and he wants to help him with his duties. Then Suyang expressed his admiration that Li Qi also wants to preserve the strength of Sejong's body and spirit. Suyang also decided to ask Li Qi whether he was going to start strengthening his body after all. However, Li Qi said that he has too little time to take care of his health, and he said that he cannot spend this time on his own physical and spiritual well-being. Suyang said that he did not know the duties of the chief inspector, but he believed that it was quite possible for Li Qi to spend at least 1 hour a day strengthening his body, and devote the rest of the time to his work and responsibilities. However, Li Qi said that even 1 hour can greatly affect the government structure, and that he does not want to take that much risk. After a short silence, Li Qi told Suyang that he simply wished the best for his king, and that he was doing everything in his power for this. After that, Li Qi turned back and went to the exit from the royal estate, telling Suyang that the same 6 months for which Suyang promised to help the king would soon pass. Soon the winter frosts passed, and one spring day, Li Qi gathered all his subordinates in the inspector's department. The inspector department worked in such a way that they could make accusations without any evidence, based only on various rumors. All inspectors considered their main goal of their department to be to keep everyone following the basic principles and rules of Joseon, as well as to keep all royal officials at bay. This time, the inspectors' department met to discuss their further actions before the start of the royal hunt tomorrow. After a meeting at the inspectors' department, Li Qi and her subordinates went to the royal estate to personally talk with the king about leading a healthy lifestyle. At this time, Sejong was just at his daily training, and Li Qi and his subordinates asked Sejong to stop practicing health promotion techniques. Li Qi told Sejong that he was very worried that after Sejong began studying methods to improve his health, government issues still remained unresolved. Sejong then told Li Qi that he had never neglected his royal duties, to which Li Qi said that the king should always set the right example for his officials. Li Qi also argued that Sejong should never put state matters on the back burner, and he wanted Sejong to give up on little things like improving his health. In response to such rudeness, Sejong told Li Qi that his principles were already more like a challenge to the king than loyalty. In response, Sejong said that the real reason for his training is to try to keep himself in good shape to set an example for everyone in the royal hunt. Then Li Qi said that this was too huge a risk, since this year the royal hunt was established by Taizhou, the king of Gangwon province. At this point, Li Qi's subordinates argued that these competitions could be dangerous, since it was very difficult for inexperienced riders to learn to confidently shoot a bow while galloping. In response to this, Sejong said that if a person constantly worries about his question, then he will not be able to learn anything new and will not be able to achieve any success. Sejong also said that until then, he will continue to train to set an example for all participants in the upcoming royal hunt. Finally, Sejong told Li Qi that he, too, should think about his training, after which Li Qi and his subordinates simply left the territory of the royal estate. The next day, Sejong and Suyang went on a royal hunt, which took place in Chorwon, one of the cities in Gangwon province. Before the start of the royal hunt, Sejong informed his hunters that this year he himself would lead the hunt. Sejong also told his hunters that in order to win this royal hunt, they all must stick together and act as one. At this moment, the royal inspectors could not believe that for the first time in many years, King Sejong himself was taking part in a royal hunt. During the last royal hunt, Sejong had such difficulty moving on his own that his subjects had to use a special stretcher for the king. After some time, the start of the royal hunt was announced, and Sejong was very pleased to ride a horse again. While riding the horse, Sejong began to realize why King Taizhou strongly recommended that Sejong take up horse riding. At this moment, Suyang looked at his father, and did not imagine that one day he would ride horses with him. At one point, Sejong turned his attention to the boar, and he was shocked that he could now clearly see into the distance. Meanwhile, a couple of royal inspectors were discussing that the king had decided not to hunt with Li Qi this time since Sejong wanted to catch his prey on his own this time. At that moment, Li Qi was watching Suyang and trying to understand why and how he was hiding his true plans so subtly. Li Qi also thought about the fact that, in essence, the royal hunt is a kind of preparation for a war in which almost anything can happen. At this moment, Li Qi took out his bow to quickly get rid of Suyang while there were no witnesses nearby. However, at that moment, the hunters reported that Sejong had managed to catch a wild boar, and then Suyang immediately went to his father. Satisfied, Sejong looked at the dead boar carcass and could not believe that he himself was able to catch his prey. Then Sejong decided to get off his horse to get a better look at his prey. Suyang arrived and wanted to make sure that his father was okay. However, in response to Suyang's questions about King Sejong's condition, Sejong only remained silent for a moment, after which Sejong immediately began to laugh loudly. After this, Sejong told Suyang that he was finally able to realize the beauty of horse riding and archery after he was able to hit a target with a bow for the first time in his life. At this moment, Li Qi was still standing on the cliff where Suyang had stood a couple of minutes ago, and he was angry that he had failed to get rid of Suyang once and for all. Then Li Qi had to remove his arrow, since he understood that he would definitely not be able to implement his plan to get rid of Suyang. At this moment, Sejong thanked Suyang for writing such an outstanding book on strengthening the body. After that, Sejong looked at Li Qi's subordinates and told them that now it was their turn to start training, and all the subordinates said that they would definitely work on themselves. The day after the royal hunt, Chan Young presented Suyang with the lat pull-down machine that Suyang asked him to make. Suyang was very happy about the appearance of the new exercise machine, and he immediately prepared to perform new exercises. After that, Suyang sat down at the simulator and began to pull the crossbar of the simulator down to check the reliability of the structure. After a few repetitions, Chan Young asked Suyang if he was satisfied with the new exercise machine. Suyang then apologized to Chan Young for being distracted from the conversation, and he told Chan Young that this machine was just perfect for pumping up his back muscles. Chan Young then told Suyang that during the creation he had learned a lot of information for himself, and he was able to understand the method of using a movable pulley, a wheel that gives movement to the drive belt. At this moment, Suyang was somewhat surprised that Chan Young learned pulley technology for the first time, as he believed that this technology was very common in this era. Young also said that he also tried to use the new exercise machine, but he severely injured his arm, and he was worried about what kind of torment Sejong would have to endure. After this, Suyang asked Chan Young to also build a leg flexion and extension machine. Chan Young calmly told Suyang that it would not be difficult for him to create such a simulator, and he promised to create this simulator in a month. Suyang looked at the new simulator and thought that Chan Young was working very hard for the king, and he told him that when he created the new simulator, he would ask Sejong to give Chan Young a vacation. However, Chan Young was categorically against the vacation, and he said that he was able to reach great heights thanks to the king, and he cannot just relax and enjoy life. Chan Young said that he is happy to see people like the king exercise and become healthy and happy. Young also thought that with the new simulator, the king would experience even more pain, as a result of which the king would develop and strengthen his body even more effectively. Suyang believed that something was definitely wrong with Chan Young, and he believed that he definitely needed a vacation. Some time later, Li Qi's subjects arrived at the royal estate, trained by Suya and Sejong. The inspectors tried their best to do all the exercises that Suyang and Sejong told them to do. However, due to such exercises, they began to get tired very quickly. Sejong also trained with the inspectors, and he felt that they were not trying at all, which made him think that they wanted to break their promise. But the inspectors said that they would keep their promise. At the same time, the inspectors looked at Suyang and asked him to persuade the king to stop for a while. However, Suyang only looked at the exhausted inspectors with a wide smile on his face and told them that he would never dare to stop the king from doing anything. Then the inspectors believed that these exercises were Suyang's revenge for the incident when they suddenly burst into the estate. During a warm-up run, one of the inspectors accidentally tripped over one of the dumbbells, causing him to fall to the ground, and his comrades wanted to know if he was okay. Then the fallen inspector told his comrades that they urgently needed to continue running after Sejong. At this moment, Suyang did not take any action to help the inspectors in any way, and he simply continued to watch the inspectors suffer. Suyang also enjoyed the sound of the inspectors barely breathing, and he believed that this particular sound was a sign that very soon Joseon would become even better. A week after the royal hunt, Li Qi announced that very soon he would have to leave Joseon for a short time and go to Hamgyando. Some of the inspectors believed that soon unknowing people would begin to gossip that Sejong had demoted Captain Li Qi in rank and sent him into exile. However, Li Qi reminded that he is already 50 years old, and that he is unlikely to make any new decisions. Li Qi admitted that he was pleasantly surprised by how Sejong's condition and health improved thanks to exercise. Li Qi also noticed that lately Prince Suyang had also changed and became a completely different person. Li Qi said that although he had distanced himself from the royal court, he was greatly worried about the activities of the Tunguska tribe, and he should go to Hamgyando as a provincial governor. Li Qi also asked to tell Suyang to be careful with Sarigama, the Ministry of Supervision of the Ming Dynasty. Li Qi learned that the head of Sarigama recently ordered a batch of hundreds of bars of soap, and this soap suddenly ended up completely in the hands of Wang Jin, the head of Sarigama. About Wang Jin, that in fact Wang Jin was a person who had a powerful evil spirit hidden in his soul and body. At this moment, Wang Jin looked at the soap and promised himself that sooner or later he would be able to get closer to Suyang. In the era where Jik lived Yun, one evening a special report began stating that a historically important figure like Suyang was actually a time traveler. The evening news reported how on Chuseok, a traditional Korean holiday, one guy deadlifted 20 kilograms more than last year. The reporter said that the main reason why everyone in Korea was so strong was Suyang, who developed such an interesting traditional game as the deadlift. The reporter also said that it was Suyang who invented soap, from which it could be concluded that Suyang was a time traveler. Lee Dongwon, director of the History Museum, believed that Suyang had the physique of a modern bodybuilder, and was so talented that it would seem that Suyang was a time traveler. Li Dong also said that over time, Suyang has become more negligent and lazy, which makes Suyang's personality subject to a lot of criticism from historical experts. Li Dong also said that if Suyang's book on methods of strengthening the body had become more significant, then Suyang would have gone down in history as a significant person, and not as an author of simple entertainment. However, all this turned out to be just a nightmare, from which Suyang suddenly woke up. Li Hyang was very concerned about Suyang's condition, and he was interested to know what was so terrible that Suyang dreamed that he woke up so quickly with loud screams. Suyang only thought that his nightmare was too plausible, but there was still no way he could become some kind of time traveler. Then Suyang looked at the large pile and believed that if he didn't put in enough effort, he would actually go down in history as the author of entertainment for traditional holidays. However, Suyang felt that he could not spend so much time on books, and he decided that tomorrow he would create a new writing system. At that moment, Suyang remembered how Sejong suggested that he make a joint effort to bring as much benefit as possible to Joseon and its people. Sejong also remembered that Sejong knew Sanskrit, and Sejong believed that Suyang could help him write the Hongminjeonam that Sejong wrote. At that moment, Suyang began to remember all the things he had to do, and now he began to understand what Chanyeong was like right now. Due to his constant work, Suyang was also unable to spend quality time with his wife and his child, as he only came home late at night, after which he would sleep for several hours and then leave again for errands. At this moment, Li Hyang noticed how often Suyang began to sigh, reminding him of Chanyeong. Then Li Hyang reminded Suyang that he wanted to appoint someone as the head coach, and he suggested that Suyang take on a student. Then Suyang immediately remembered Ma Liang, who was a commoner who could not achieve the highest government position even with his extraordinary abilities. Despite such a good candidate, Suyang also wanted to appoint people from several classes to the positions of head coaches. Previously, Li Hyang believed that in a healthy lifestyle, a person should have a desire to respect his parents, but Suyang also believed that high-ranking people were also needed here. Suyang believed that in order to train people on the territory of the royal estate, the position of head trainer should be filled by one of Sejong's relatives. Suyang believed that his cousin Seo Sang-gun could be cast in the role, but he also needed to somehow entice him. Sang-gong was the son of the former King Yang-ning, who was overthrown for adultery in secret from the royal family and for committing corruption, after which Sejong became king. Also rumors in Joseon that Sang-gun was not much different from his father, and Suyang believed that Sang-gun could very well become a bad person like his father. The next day, Suyang was still able to personally meet with Sang-gong, who did not stand out in any way. Suyang believed that his cousin had gone mad after his father subjected his concubine to cruel trials. However, Now Sang-gun looks like a completely normal and calm person, and Soo-young believed that this event simply had not happened yet. Soo-young asked Sang-gong if he knew about his book on healthy living, and Sang-gong said that he was aware that Soo-young was able to open a new scientific field. Then Soo-young invited Sang-gun to become his student, to learn all the secrets of a healthy lifestyle, and Sang-gun immediately agreed with this proposal. Soo-young was then happy that Sang-gong agreed to train with him, and he told Ma-il that he would train him. Ma-il approached Sang-gun and told him that they first needed to warm up on a wooden block, after which they could begin the main exercises. However, at this moment, Sang-gun immediately began to insult Ma-il, telling him that he stinks very much afterward. Soo-young and Ma-il were amazed at such a sudden change in Sang-gong's behavior, and Sang-gong asked Soo-young how he could even have such an illegitimate and low-born commoner like Ma-il in his circle. Ma-il was a little confused about why Sang-gong suddenly became rude, and then Ma-il didn't pay attention to Sang-gong's words, and he simply told him to go train. After a few minutes, Sang-gun began to try to squat with a barbell, but after a couple of minutes he began to get very tired. Then Soo-young drew Sang-gong's attention to Ma-il, who could easily withstand a lot of weight, while Sang-gong couldn't even handle 60 pounds. At this point, Sang-gong began to beg Soo-young to do the exercises with lighter weights. After a couple of seconds, Sang-gong, exhausted, simply fell to his knees in front of Soo-young and Ma-il. At this moment, Soo-young asked Sang-gong why he treated Ma-il like that if people had treated him so rudely before. Soo-young also said that everyone used to treat Ma-il the same way because he was an illegitimate son, and Soo-young didn't understand why Sang-gong was acting the same way people treated him before. Sang-gun said that if he had not done this, he would have started to feel so humiliated that he simply would not have wanted to live anymore. Sang-gun said that his older and younger brother were better than him in everything, and because of this, Sang-gun had no chance to conduct government affairs. Sang-gun was also constantly surrounded by people who were afraid that he might pose some kind of threat to the royal throne. Sang-gun said that he was very upset by his powerlessness, which only made him more anxious about his unsuccessful attempts to change something in his life. Then Soo-young told Sang-gong that in any case he should not behave as basely as those who offended him, since he believed that the oppression of a nobleman was the worst thing for any commoner. Then Sang-gun said that he was very ashamed of that, and promised that he would not behave like that again. At this moment, Soo-young and Ma-il were glad that Sang-gun realized everything, since this could have a positive impact on Sang-gun's future. Soo-young then told Sang-gong that Ma-il should teach him the 3 basic exercises. Soo-young also told Sang-gong that if he could lift 650 pounds in each of the 3 exercises, then he would make him responsible for a healthy lifestyle in the royal palace. Sang-gun could not believe that Soo-young could put him in such a position, and Soo-young reminded Sang-gun that Sejong had personally verified the effectiveness of his training. Soo-young said that now anyone who wants to become part of the royal palace must definitely know everything about a healthy lifestyle, and the coach will have to control it. Soo-young also said that if Sang-gong becomes the head coach in the royal palace, then he will train Prince Li Hyang, that is, Sang-gong will also become the personal trainer of the future king. Soo-young also thought that if Sang-gong achieved such an important position in the royal palace, then no one would mock and humiliate him anymore. Sang-gong could not believe that he would become part of the royal court, and he was somewhat ashamed that he could not even master the 30 books. Then Soo-young and Ma-il told Sang-gong that he need not worry about this, since they promised him that they would definitely help him, since Soo-young was going to create his own letter system. Hangmanjomian soon emerged, since Korean speech was very different from Chinese speech and Joseon residents could not use the Chinese script. Previously, illiterate people could not put their thoughts and problems on paper through writing, but with the advent of the new letter system, anyone could master writing. Years passed, and over time, Soo-young's little son, Hyun-dan, grew up. One day, little Hyun-dan came to his father to show him how easily and deftly he could lift a cat to show Soo-young his strength. After that, Soo-young picked up Hyun-dan in his arms, and the little boy asked Soo-young why Uncle Young-ho falls to the ground after every practice. Soo-young told his son that in order to become stronger, Uncle Young-ho and Sang-gun train every day, and if their muscles start to hurt, then over time they become bigger and stronger. After that, Soo-young and his son approached Sang-gun, and Hyungdan noticed that Sang-gun always sits or lies down after training. However, Sang-gun said that it was hard for him to train because everyone around him was practicing longer than him, and he told Hyungdong to start learning new sciences as early as possible. Then Hyungdan took out his father's book on a healthy lifestyle and believed that Sang-gun was talking about it. Sang-gun was amazed that little Hyungdan managed to learn to read and write, and then Hyungdan invited Sang-gun to read his father's book together. Soo-young thought about the fact that he had been in this era for 5 years already, and during this time a lot of sports equipment, such as various barbells, dumbbells and weights, had already appeared in Joseon. A lot of time has already passed since Soo-young found himself in the Joseon era, and every day his past life seemed to him like a distant dream. Soon, the palace began to show more and more interest in a healthy lifestyle, and even Soo-young's wife began to train and strengthen her body with various exercises. During another training session, Soo-young's wife finally managed to lift the dumbbells on her own. However, at one point, Soo-young's wife felt unwell, causing her to suddenly lose consciousness and begin to fall, but Soo-young managed to catch his wife and prevent any damage from the fall from occurring. After a couple of seconds, Soo-young's wife was able to regain consciousness, and she told Soo-young that she began to feel dizzy, after which her eyes darkened and her breathing became a little difficult. Soo-young's wife complained that she was starting to feel a little nauseous, which scared Soo-young's wife's servants and Ma Yil a little. Soo-young then told his wife that these were only temporary symptoms caused by the sudden flow of blood from the head, and he told his wife to take a deep breath. At this moment, Soo-young was thinking that he was lucky to have his wife by his side, and that he was able to save her from more serious injuries that could have occurred after the fall. Soo-young also thought that as the number of people who began to practice exercises grew, the number of such cases would only increase, and he had to figure out how to reduce such cases to a minimum. During another training session, Sang-gun told Soo-young that he would like to introduce him to one person. Sang-gun said that he would like to introduce Soo-young to Hyun-gyu, who one day passed his exams and became an officer of Tonimum, one of the 8 great gates of Seoul. One day, Hyun-shio heard that Soo-young was able to lift 150 pounds, and Hyun-gyu wanted to repeat this exercise by lifting a stone of the same weight, and he managed to do it. However, after a while, Hyun-gyu was fired from his position because the exercise severely injured his back, causing him to be unable to straighten his back properly. At one point, it seemed to Soo-young that he had once heard about this man somewhere, and he remembered how this man was able to suppress an entire uprising. Soo-young believed that he still managed to somehow change the course of history, since Hyun-gyu had to retire only after receiving the highest rank, and soon after that he was seriously wounded. Gun then told Soo-young that he made a strong impression on Hyun-gyu, and Sang-gun believed that Soo-young should not ignore the potential of such a talented person as Hyun-gyu. Soo-young was interested in this story and thought that he should really look at Hyun-gyu to understand his true potential. Meanwhile, Hyun-gyu sat at home, drinking and blaming Soo-young for what happened to him. Also, Hyun-gyu, what exactly is Soo-young put him in such a bad light in front of people? Then one of Hyun's friends Gyu said that the king himself went through the path of Soo-young's teachings, which once again proves the real effectiveness of these trainings. At this moment, Hyuk-gyu promised himself that he would personally find out from Soo-young whether he really managed to lift 250 pounds. At this moment, Soo-young was already standing behind Hyun-gyu, who continued to desecrate Soo-young and his method of strengthening the body and leading a healthy lifestyle. At one point, Soo-young finally decided to interrupt Hyun-gyu and tell him that he was actually only able to lift 150 pounds that time. Hyun-gyu was very frightened by the sudden appearance of Soo-young, who had a visit with Hyun-gyu's small talk. At this moment, Soo-young was able to get a better look at Hyun-gyu, and he believed that after Hyun's injury, Gyu began to neglect meals, which made him gain weight. Even though Hyun-gyu gained weight, about Hyun there was a rumor that even after a back injury, he still continued to enjoy horse riding. After that, Soo-young said to Hyun-gyu that due to the fact that he continued to train, his condition worsened somewhat, and Hyun-gyu believed that he would not be able to recover. Soo-young said that there is a way that can cure Hyun-gyu. However, there was no guarantee that this method could completely cure Hyun-gyu, and all he had to do was trust Soo-young and listen to him. First, Soo-young showed Hyun-gyu how to do lunges that stretch motor muscles and joints. Soo-young also showed Hyun-gyu how to do the Mackenzie exercise, which also strengthens and warms up most of all muscles. First, Hyun-gyu did not understand how these movement exercises could help him with his illness, and Soo-young decided to immediately tell Hyun-gyu about his treatment method. Soo-young said to Hyun-gyu that he will not be able to lift heavy weights, and despite the fact that after these exercises he will feel better, his back pain appeared a year ago, from which it will not be able to be completely cured. Hyun-gyu could not believe that he would not be able to completely cure his back, and he believed that now he would not be able to fulfill his duty as a man, which would make him unable to even look his wife in the eyes. After Hyun-gyu mentioned his wife, Soo-young remembered a recent incident where his wife fainted during exercise. Then Soo-young said to Hyun-gyu that under such circumstances Hyun-gyu can look for ways to treat such diseases. Hyun-gyu believed that Soo-young wanted him to become a doctor, which he was very afraid of, since he had never read any medical books. Soo-young said to Hyun-gyu that even doctors cannot know all the intricacies of the structure of human muscles and bones, and therefore we need a doctor who will engage in rehabilitation therapy, who knows about the connection between muscles and skeleton. Then Hyun-gyu told Soo-young that he was a very deep thinker, and he told Soo-young that now if anyone spoke ill of Soo-young, he would personally punish such people. Soon Hyun-gyu began training with Soo-young, and with each passing day, the number of people who wanted to start training and strengthening their bodies grew more and more. Soo-young believed that with the advent of the new language system, more and more people could learn to read, which made his book very popular, and at this rate, all people would practice on the street. At this moment, Soo-young began to think that he needed to design such sportswear so that even poor people could afford such clothes. After another training session, Soo-young and his wife went to the royal tailor, who made them special training clothes from cheap cotton fabric. However, at first Soo-young's wife was somewhat displeased with the fact that these clothes were made of cotton, since she believed that cotton clothes were worn only by ordinary people. Then Soo-young decided to try on new clothes so that his wife would appreciate the new clothes. It was the first time Soo-young's wife had seen such clothes, and Soo-young said that these clothes were specially designed for training. Soo-young also told his wife that he specifically chose cotton for these clothes because it is not only cheap, but also comfortable. Soo-young also told his wife that he was well aware that nobles were unlikely to wear such clothes because of the fabric. However, Soo-young's wife said that she was a little hasty with her conclusions, and she agreed that these clothes should be good for training. Soo-young was glad that his wife approved of such clothes, and then Soo-young asked the tailor to take these clothes as a sample and begin mass production of these clothes. Soon, mass production of sports t-shirts began, which consisted of cheap materials, which is why even ordinary people could afford such clothes. One evening, several young men spent time at Chingwangsa Temple, where they studied Soo-young's book together. Shin Suk-chu, one of the scholars of Jipyeongjiang, noticed that Meiju Xian, who was also a scholar of Jipyeongjiang, had been studying Soo-young's book a lot lately. At this moment, Meiju began to feel tired, and he did not even notice how quickly time passed while he studied Soo-young's book. At this moment, Xing-chu wanted to ask Meiju why he suddenly started spending so much time studying. Meiju then told Xing-chu that he could not sit idly by while Soo-young set such an example for them through his book. At this moment, Xing-chu noticed Soo-young's book Unhealthy Living in Meiju's hands, and he said that he had read a little about this book and really liked its contents. Meiju also turned his attention to how Tange repeated the push-ups he learned about from Soo-young's book. Meiju said that he noticed Tange suddenly disappear and return early in the morning, and he believed that Tange was going for a run in the mountainous area. Tange said that he would like to run up the mountain, but Samgaksan Mountain was too steep for jogging, and Xing-chu suggested that Tange jump rope to warm up his body and get rid of unnecessary thoughts. Xing-chu also told Tange that Soo-young's book did not seem that good to him, and despite the fact that it described ways to strengthen the body, most of the information was taken from other manuals. Then Tange told Xing-chu that he should not take the book so lightly that the king himself praised it. Meiju wanted to prevent further disputes between Tange and Xing-chu, and then he suggested that they discuss this topic in more detail tomorrow. The next morning, Tange, Meiju and Xing-chu with several other scholars gathered at the temple again, and Meiju asked Tange to give his opinion on Soo-young's book, since he had read the most books. Tange said that the book showed many ways to strengthen the human body, but there was no clear description of developing an understanding of the essence of these exercises. Xing-chu said that usually religious books contain the thoughts of true sages, and he doubted that Soo-young was one of those sages. Meiju also asked Tange how cultivating one's body allows one to show respect for one's parents, if one's respect for one's parents should be manifested in one's reputation. Mei Zhu also learned from the book that developing one's body allows one to survive any heat and cold, but Mei Zhu himself was not entirely sure of the correctness of this idea. Xing Chu said that he is somewhat concerned about the fact that many exercises require a person to use a lot of different expensive equipment. Xing Chu also asked Tange how many people were able to change for the better thanks to the exercises described in Suyang's book. To dispel all doubts of Mei Zhu and Xing Chu as much as possible, Tange cited King Sejong himself as an example of change. Tange then believed that Mei Zhu and Xing Chu were trying to belittle the king and his achievements in developing his body, but Mei Zhu and Xing Chu immediately began to refute this theory. Tange said that from the moment Sejong began studying Suyang's book, he became a completely different person, and even Joseon ministers believed that the king became even more active than in his youth. Tange also said that despite the fact that the book had its flaws, the body is still transformed, and even if they start training as well, they will still be able to walk normally the next day. After Tange's words, Mei Zhu believed that Tange was suggesting that they buy the same expensive exercise equipment to start training their muscles. However, Tange said that even though they won't be able to afford such expensive machines, they can still use nearby tools of the same weight, such as rocks or logs. Tange also told his comrades that if they were not going to start training their muscles, then no one would force them to do it. After this conversation, Mei Zhu and Xing Chu began training for a whole week. However, on the 8th day, Mei Zhu, Xing Chu and several other scientists began to complain of extreme fatigue, which is why everyone decided to stop their training. At this point, only Tange remained, who was somewhat surprised at how quickly his comrades surrendered. Then Tange believed that his comrades simply did not have enough patience, and then he was the only one who did not give up and decided to continue training hard. About a month later, Chan Young created new shoulder press and seated row machines for Suyang. First of all, Suyang decided to test the new simulators in practice, and for this he called a couple of inspectors. However, at this moment, Chan Young was not listening to Suyang, and he was only thinking about how difficult it would be for the inspectors to exercise if he added more weight to these machines. At this point, Suyang continued to praise Chan Young, to which Chan Young said that a loyal subject like him is simply obliged to work as hard as he can for the good of the king. After some time, Chan Young noticed that the inspectors were still exhausted after testing the new simulators for strength. The moment Li Hiang arrived, the inspectors immediately began to pay their respects to him. Even after Li Hiang sat down at one of the simulators, the inspectors still continued to bow to Li Hiang. However, the weight of the simulator turned out to be too much for Li Hiang, and he said that he would punish these inspectors right now for choosing to mock Li Hiang in this way. Then Suyang thought about how Li Hiang would react when he found out that it was Suyang who put such weight on the simulator to test the physical abilities of his older brother. After that, Suyang sent Li Hiang to perform a bench press with a barbell. Soon, Li Hiang still managed to perform the bench press as many times as Suyang told him. After the exercise, Suyang congratulated Li Hiang for finally being able to lift 500 pounds. Li Hiang was flattered by such praise from Suyang, and he believed that after just a year and a half of hard training, he would be able to lift 700 pounds. However, Suyang told Li Hiang that each person's muscles grow differently, and gradually Suyang increased the weight of his barbell to 800 pounds. Suyang also said that after he started lifting 800 pounds, his muscles began to grow much more slowly. Suyang believed that even though he and his brother had equally strong muscles, due to Li Hiang training less, it would take him 2 to 5 years to be able to lift 700 pounds. However, Suyang believed that it did not matter how much time it took him, because it was important for him that Li Hiang did not go astray. And then he ordered Li Hiang to repeat the bench press one more time. The next day, Suyang's wife was not feeling well, and Suyang wanted to know what happened to his wife. However, Suyang's wife said that her food poisoning and nausea had gotten a little worse, making her feel a little worse, so she asked Suyang to get her some meat that Suyang didn't eat. Suyang considered that his wife was telling him about pork meat, and he said that because of his proper meat diet, he only eats chicken and lean beef. However, within a second, Suyang left his wife's room and told her that he would get the best pork for her. A few minutes later, Suyang arrived at the farm, and he asked the farmer to bring him the best pig, and then the farmer showed Suyang the biggest pig on the farm. However, Suyang saw in front of him a cute little pig, which in size was more reminiscent of a baby pig. Suyang looked at this pig and thought that the farmer decided to play a trick on him, but the farmer swore that this pig was the largest on the entire farm. Soon, Kim Jong-so, one of the best warriors of Joseon, arrived at Sejong, who wanted to tell Sejong the news that he had managed to defeat the northern barbarians. Sejong told Kim Jong that he had come a long and hard way, and that with the coming of winter it would be more difficult for the northern savages to reach the borders of Joseon. Kim Jong paid his respects to Sejong, after which the king hosted a small private banquet to celebrate Kim Jong's return. A few minutes later, the servants set the table especially for Kim Jong, and Suyang invited Kim Jong to drink to the king. While Suyang was pouring Kim Jong a drink, Kim Jong told Suyang that he had heard about how Suyang was able to strengthen his body, and he said that Suyang could now rival the Joseon general himself. Suyang was pleased to hear such compliments from Kim Jong addressed to him, and he said that he did not build muscles in order to shoot a bow or swing a sword. However, Kim Jong told Suyang that he was sending something more valuable than bows and arrows to the north, but Suyang did not understand what exactly Kim Jong was telling him. Kim Jong then explained that he was talking about the alcohol that was sent to him and his army. Kim Jong also said that it was thanks to alcohol that he was able to reduce the number of people in his squad who would suffer from rotting wounds. Then Suyang realized why there was still no rust in his distillation apparatus, which indicated that his invention was now being used everywhere. However, Kim Jong also said that this alcohol had a downside, and soldiers often drank bottles of alcohol to prevent the occurrence and development of colds. For this reason, many problems arose in the detachment due to the fact that sometimes some soldiers were intoxicated. Then Suyang became interested in how Kim Chin was able to solve the problem with drunken soldiers, and then Kim Chin told a very effective and funny way to wean soldiers from drinking alcohol. Kim Jong said that they started adding motherwort to alcohol, and if the soldiers tried to drink even a little alcohol, they would immediately spit out all the alcohol, which made Suyang and Kim Jong laugh very much. Suddenly, Lee Ji-nak walked past Suyang and Kim Jong, and Kim Jong invited him to join them and have a drink together. Suyang heard a familiar name, and he remembered that Lee Ji-nak was also considered one of the strongest warriors of Joseon, who performed well during the battle with the northern savages. At this point, Lee Ji stopped and told Kim Jong that he was simply serving the king and following his will. Then Kim Jong decided to go about his business, leaving Suyang and Lee Ji alone, hoping that two strong people would certainly find a common topic for conversation. While walking, Lee Ji told Suyang that he came here to carry out Sejong's orders and learn a new writing and alphabetic system. At this point, Suyang decided to try to study Lee Ji's physique, and for the first time in Joseon, Suyang saw a person with a body as strong and toned as his. Suyang also remembered that at the time when he became the new ruler and began the cleansing, Lee Ji would try to gather an army from the Jurhan tribe. However, at the most unexpected moment, the generals will stab Lee Ji in the back, which will greatly weaken the Joseon army, making Lee Ji one of the most powerful individuals in Korean history. Suyang also thought that if Lee Ji did survive during historical events, then Suyang would have to get rid of Lee Ji on his own. Such thoughts made Suyang very uncomfortable being around Lee Ji, and he believed that Lee Ji wanted to talk to him about this topic. At one point, Lee Ji broke the silence and told Suyang that rumors that Sejong had changed a lot had reached the very north. Lee Ji also said that he had some questions for Suyang about his work, and he asked Suyang if he could personally visit his estate to learn more about his teachings. At this moment, Suyang felt that Lee Ji just wanted to compete with him, but he still allowed Lee Ji to visit him sometime. The next day, Sang Gong trained with Ma Il again, and on the same day, Lee Ji arrived at Suyang's estate. Seeing Lee Ji, Sang Gong and Ma Il couldn't believe that Lee Ji was an ordinary person. At this moment, Lee Ji looked at Sang Gong's hand and saw a dumbbell in it, and then Lee Ji asked Sang Gong to let him try to lift it. Before handing the dumbbell to Lee Ji, Sang Gong told him to be careful, as this dumbbell might be much heavier than it might seem at first glance. Lee Ji took the dumbbell in his hand and began to lift it, and he was convinced that the dumbbell was indeed somewhat heavy. Sang Gong was shocked at how Lee Ji could bend his arms so easily with the dumbbells in his hand, as San Gong had previously used the dumbbells solely for deadlifting. After this, Li Ji said that he had heard rumors that Suyang was once able to perform 3 basic exercises with a total load of 1,000 pounds. Li Ji then turned to face Suyang behind him and asked him how much weight he could lift. A few minutes later, Li Ji prepared to lift a 700-pound barbell, and he successfully completed the task. While Li Ji was deadlifting 700 pounds, San Gong looked at Li Ji and thought that he would not be able to lift that kind of weight even after half a year of hard training. After Li Ji placed the barbell on the ground, Suyang told him that this was the first time he had seen a person who could successfully handle such weight. At this moment, Suyang was thinking that in the conditions of this era, Li Ji could be called a strongman from God. At one point, Suyang thought that Li Ji was dissatisfied with something, but Li Ji tried to hide it by telling Suyang that he had learned a lot about body training. However, Suyang asked Li Ji to be more honest, as Suyang realized that his book had a lot of flaws since he did all the research in his book alone. Recently, Li Ji visited Sejong, and Sejong said that Suyang had developed a book with new techniques for training the body, and he said that this knowledge could also be used in the military training of soldiers. Suyang then realized that his training methods would be very difficult to apply to the Joseon military industry. Li Ji said that the book mainly describes muscle building techniques, while the muscles that are most used when using weapons are hardly developed. Li Ji also said that to use weapons, a soldier must also use other muscle groups, about which almost nothing is written in Suyang's book. Li Ji also said that the book says that in order to develop muscles, a person must eat enough meat, but in a real battle, an ordinary soldier cannot afford to eat meat. Li Ji also said that due to the current realities of military affairs, healthcare remains only a theoretical science that cannot be used in military craft. At this moment, Suyang was greatly offended that Li Ji believed that he was unfamiliar with the craft of war. Even though Suyang did not know the military trade, the young Jik he used to be was very familiar with military affairs, since it was in the army that he began to get involved in bodybuilding. Then Suyang promised himself that within 3 years he would be able to supplement his book with body-strengthening methods for soldiers. Meanwhile, Sejong was studying another appeal from the ruler of the Ming dynasty. At that moment, Li Hiang arrived with Sejong, who wanted to know why his father had called him to him. Sejong told Li Hiang that the ruler of the Ming dynasty wanted to order 100 units of soap from them, and then Sejong was once again convinced that it was not in vain that his people began to grow so many linden trees. However, Sejong said that the ruler of the Ming dynasty wants to personally meet Suyang, who created the soap. Sejong knew that Suyang had no acquaintances or connections with the Ming dynasty, and then Sejong believed that the eunuch from the ministry personally wanted to meet Suyang. Li Hiang then decided that they should not worry about Suyang, since of all the people in Joseon he had the broadest outlook, and Li Hiang suggested sending Suyang to the Ming kingdom as an ambassador. Meanwhile, Suyang trained hard to update his book with new body-strengthening techniques for Joseon soldiers. The next day, Suyang continued to train Sang-gun, and throughout his training, Sang-gun was able to achieve significant results. Suyang praised Sang-gun for being able to lift 500 pounds less than a year after he began his training, and Suyang believed that within the next year Sang-gun could become a true master. However, Sang-gun believed that he would not become a master in the next year, since even Hiang could lift much more weight. Afterwards, Sun Jian'e reminded Suyang about how much he had previously wanted to take a hostage, and Suyang believed that Sang-gun had forgotten about it due to his training. However, Sang-gun said that he needs to start looking for a hostage again, since everyone around him is worried that he still doesn't have children. Sang-gun also said that he decided to choose Ham Nyang-yun as his concubine, and at that moment Suyang thought that in the Joseon era, people have children before the age of 20. Suyang also thought that if in the Joseon era a man was already 20 years old, then instead of a wife he was looking for a concubine. And Sejong at one time had a similar problem, and then his first son was born at 23 years old. Sang-gong believed that Suyang suspected something, but Suyang did not know how to explain to Sang-gong that his future one would be killed by his own father. Then Suyang told Sang-gong that he had read fortunes from the Book of Changes, and he learned that if Sang-gong marries a second time, then a mysterious atrocity will overtake his wife. Sang-gong was somewhat surprised that Suyang was able to foresee not just something bad, but a mysterious atrocity. Suyang then told Sang-gun that physical strength would help him avoid such a sad fate. At this point, Sang-gong thought that by evil, Suyang meant something like a thief who would attack him and his wife. Then Sang-gun wondered if a woman could develop her physical abilities. Then Suyang looked at his wife, who was working hard, and he said that a woman can also develop and strengthen her body. Suyang also said that he could train his future concubine in martial arts, after which he asked Sang-gun to capture him. Sang-gong grabbed Suyang by the collar of his t-shirt, and Suyang told Sang-gong that this grab is the most common move before a fight. Sang-gong then said with a smile on his face that he had also grabbed people this way before, after which he apologized to Suyang for that he had to grab it like that. At this moment, Suyang tensed his hands and said that he knew a great way for a person to get out of such a grip. After that, Suyang tensed his hands even more and hit Sang-gong's forearms, causing Sang-gong to immediately let go of Suyang. After this technique, Sang-gong fell to the ground, and Suyang told him that this technique could easily break the attacker's joint. After this technique, Suyang offered to bring Nyen Yun to him so that his wife could teach her similar techniques. For several years, Nyen Yun and Suyang's wife studied self-defense techniques, after which they moved on to practical training. First, Suyang's wife showed Nyen Yun how to hold the opponent from behind, after which Nyen Yun tried to repeat the technique, but she did not have enough strength to stably restrain Suyang's wife. After a few days of training, Nyen Yun was able to master several self-defense techniques, but she still did not understand why she had to learn such techniques. Then Sang-gong told Nyen Yun that one day these techniques could save her life, and Nyen Yun said that she would definitely use these techniques to protect herself from the robber. After some time, one of Suyang's servants came to him with the news that trouble had happened to Yangnan. Suyang learned that Yangnan's left arm was broken and his teeth were badly damaged, and Suyang began to guess what really happened. Even though Suyang taught Nyen Yun self-defense techniques, he did not expect that Nyen Yun would be able to inflict such serious injuries on Yangnan. After this, Suyang, Sejong, Yangnan, Nyen Yun and several other people gathered in the palace to find out what really happened. On the day of the incident, Yangnan was relaxing at home and thinking about how his son started training so hard. At one point, Yangnan ordered Sang-gong's new concubine to bring him a cup of tea. After some time, Nyen Yun brought Yangnan his cup of tea, but the dissatisfied Yangnan immediately threw the cup of tea towards Nyen Yun. At this moment, Yangnan didn't like that Nyen Yun took so long to prepare tea for him, which made him feel like Nyen Yun grew the tea leaves herself. At one point, Yangnan stopped shouting at Nyen Yun, and then he began to take a closer look at his son's new concubine. Then Yangnan thought that his son had chosen a very pretty girl for himself, since their tastes in girls were almost similar. After staring for a while, Yangnan grabbed Nyen Yun by the collar of her clothes. Nyen Yun was panicked, and then she hit Yangning's jaw with her head as quickly as possible. Nyen Yun's blow was so strong that after her blow, Yangnan's teeth and nose were severely damaged. After Yangnan accidentally let go of Nyen Yun, Sang-gong's concubine immediately grabbed Yangnan's hand and began to twist it. Nyen Yun held Yangnan's hand so tightly that his hand immediately broke. While clarifying the situation, Sejong turned to the investigator to tell him everything that he managed to find out. The investigator told Sejong that in this case, Prince Yangning was beaten by his son's concubine, resulting in several severe injuries. Then Sejong wondered how such a simple concubine as Nyen Yun could cripple such a seasoned warrior as Yangnan. At that moment, Yangnan told Sejong that Suyang and Sang-gun taught Nyen Yun a special technique that made it possible to neutralize almost any person. Then Sejong believed that in such cases the criminal received punishment in the form of execution. Yangnan also demanded that Sejong execute everyone who was in any way connected with this case, including Suyang, who taught Nyen Yun this deadly technique. After this, Sejong asked Suyang to tell him what really happened, and Suyang only said that this technique was taught to him by none other than God himself. After Sejong learned all the details of the situation, he came to the conclusion that Suyang had developed a new method of defense. After this, Sejong asked everyone who came here on this matter who was really responsible for this incident. At this moment, the Prime Minister wanted to say that considering Yangning's disposition and character, he was sure that Yangnan wanted to kill Nyen Yun, while she was simply putting up proper resistance. After that, the head of the judge's order, Yu Jiamin, said that even though Yangnan was to blame for all this, Nyen Yun also committed a serious crime by damaging Yangnan's body. At this moment, Sejong found himself in a very difficult position, because even though he knew about Yangning's previous atrocities, he still had to make a decision based on state laws. At this moment, Sejong thought that for such actions Nyan was subject to the same punishment as for treason, namely the death penalty. Sejong could not give Nyan the death penalty, and he gave Nyan the punishment of 20 lashes. A couple of minutes later, Nyan was tied to a special wooden cross, after which one of the guards approached her with a whip. Nyan was afraid that this guard would start beating her so hard that after the punishment she would simply not be able to move normally. Suddenly, after a second, the guard prepared to deliver the first blow of the whip to Nyan's legs. However, the guard's blow turned out to be so weak that at first Nyan did not even realize that she had already been hit. Nyan didn't understand why she didn't feel the blow, and then she realized that this guard felt a little sorry for hitting Nyan, and he only decided to pretend that he hit Nyan hard enough. Then Nyan decided to play along with the good guard a little, and then she began to scream very loudly, feigning unbearable pain. At one point, Yang-nin noticed that something was wrong here, and then he stopped the guard, who was already ready to strike a second blow at Nyan. Yang-nin noticed that the guard decided to spare Nyan, and then he demanded from the guard that after her blows, her legs would be mutilated. However, after just a couple of seconds, Yang-nin pushed the guard aside and grabbed the whip. Yang-nin said that he would do the rest of the blows on Nyan himself, after which he swung the cut with all his might. However, within a second, Sejong was standing behind Yang-nin, who told his brother to stop right now. Yang-nin didn't understand how Sejong ended up behind him so quickly, since Yang-nin was much stronger than Sejong before. At this moment, Yang-nin believed that Sejong wanted to leave the person who crippled his brother unharmed. However, Sejong no longer wanted to listen to Yang-nin, and he demanded that he shut up right now. Sejong also told Yang-nin that if he tried to do something like that, Yang-nin would immediately end up in eternal exile. After that, Sejong let go of the whip that Yang-nin was holding so tightly, who immediately fell to the ground. Sejong then reminded Yang-nin that King Taejong had forbidden him to enter Joseon territory, but today Sejong showed mercy and allowed him to return. Sejong also said that many of his subjects had repeatedly begged him to send Yang-nin into exile, and that he was no longer going to tolerate his grave atrocities. After this, Sejong asked the guards to put Yang-nin under house arrest, and the guards happily prepared to arrest Yang-nin. While the guards were tying Yang-nin's hands despite his injury, Yang-nin insisted to Sejong that he could not do this to him. After one of the guards tied up Yang-nin, he told Sejong that he was ready to proceed to arrest Yang-nin. After one of the guards began to take Yang-nin away, Sejong asked one of the guards to release Nyan right now. At this moment, Sang-gun was expressing his sincere gratitude to Sejong, and he did not know how he could thank such a merciful king as Sejong. However, Sejong told Sang-gun that he would right now provide him and Nyan with separate housing, where they could live together peacefully. Sejong also felt that Nyan had gone through a lot of difficulties in life, and he said that from now on they cannot worry about anything and rest peacefully. Soon, Yang-nin found himself under strict house arrest, and a few days later Soo-young had a daughter, whom he named Joo-hyun. For some time, Soo-young lived quietly with his wife and children, but one day an unusual guest came to Soo-young's house. This very guest turned out to be Tanj, who was persistently studying Soo-young's book on strengthening the human body and leading a healthy lifestyle. Soo-young thought that he had already seen this young man in Chipyeongjong, and Soo-young suddenly became curious as to what exactly prompted Tanj to put aside all his affairs and visit Soo-young. Soo-young also noticed that since the last time he saw Tanj, his body had become so strong that at first Soo-young didn't even recognize him. Tanj said that he started studying Soo-young's book after his back began to hurt badly, and after studying the book and doing the exercises, the back pain went away. However, even after the pain in his back went away, Tanj did not give up training, and over time, his body became much stronger, and he wanted to personally thank Soo-young for such an invaluable contribution. However, Soo-young told Tanj that there was nothing to thank him for since he did not train Tanj personally. Tanj then asked Soo-young if he could participate in his physical training program. Soo-young thought that if Tangya were an ordinary person, he would agree, but Tangya was a member of Seoksun, and if Tangya were to study, it could affect the future scientific progress of Joseon. Then Soo-young told Tanj that he was a little worried that such a talented scientist like him decided to give up studying other sciences and devote himself entirely to training. However, Tanj said with full confidence that his friends were more talented scientists, and that it was unlikely that anything could happen if he suddenly decided to change his occupation. Then Soo-young believed that Tanj wanted to become a sports coach, and Tange confirmed his guesses. Tange also told Suyang that he had already informed the king that he would like to leave Chipyeongjong. Then Suyang told Tanga that he was ready to train him, after which they went together for another training session. Before starting the training, Tange decided to introduce himself in front of everyone. Sang-gun was already familiar with Tange, and he believed that Tange had only recently started training, and then Sang-gun told him that he still had a lot to learn. Tange did not argue with Sang-gun, and he asked him to teach him all the necessary exercises. Before teaching Tange new exercises, Tange felt that the first thing he needed to do was check what he was already capable of. At first, Sang-gong suggested testing how many pull-ups Tange could do, and Sang-gong thought that it would be difficult for a beginner like Tange to do this exercise correctly. Sang-gun also decided to brag a little to Tange that in 6 months of hard training he was able to master 4 skills. However, after a couple of seconds, Sang-gun noticed how easily Tange could do pull-ups, and then Sang-gun started counting the number of times Tange could do pull-ups. Sang-gun felt a little ashamed that he would be able to do as many pull-ups as Tange did, and began to think that Tange was simply doing the exercise incorrectly. Suyang watched how easily Tange stretched, and he believed that with Tange's arrival, everyone else would also try to practice with the same tenacity as Tange. After training, Suyang went with Tange to a small area that had an impeccable view of the mountains. Tange looked at the forest and thought that with such volumes of raw materials it would be possible to grow plants with a total volume of 20,000 pounds. Tange thought that if they put all this linden into making soap and started selling it to the Ming dynasty, they could get a lot of money. But Suyang said that they could get something more than money. At first Tangye didn't understand what Suyang meant, and Suyang said that they could achieve a bright future for all of Joseon. Soon Sejong called Suyang to tell him that one man named Ugan was able to heal his lower back thanks to Suyang's book, and even doctors could not help this man with his illness. Sejong also told Suyang that for such achievements, he was entitled to a worthy reward. But Sejong had one small request to Suyang. Sejong asked Suyang to meet with Prime Minister Hwang Hee, who resigned a month ago due to some health problems, and Sejong asked Suyang to try to help him. Sejong understood that most likely nothing could be done about the Prime Minister's current condition due to his advanced age, but it would be nice to at least try to do something. Soon, Suyang went to the estate where the Prime Minister lives, and the local servants were very frightened that Suyang arrived to them so quickly. At this moment, the Prime Minister's servants began to make a big fuss about Suyang's arrival, but Suyang himself believed that these people were just a little strange. After this, Suyang entered the estate, and there he saw an 80-year-old old man and a special person who voiced everything that the old man told him, since it was difficult for him to speak himself. The old man said that he would like to carry out the king's order, but after 70 years of life he developed problems with his lower back. Suyang told the servants that King Sejong himself sent him here, but Suyang said that even he could not somehow help the Prime Minister in such a situation. Suyang also noticed a paduk board on the Prime Minister's desk, and Suyang told the Prime Minister that now, due to his condition, he should not play the game anymore. After this, Suyang put his hand on the board and noticed that the board was warm, from which he concluded that the Prime Minister had been playing paduk just recently. After this, Suyang looked at the Prime Minister and told him that there was no way he could help him in this case. However, Suyang told the Prime Minister that despite such a serious condition, he could still train him to control some processes in his body. After this, the servant told Suyang on behalf of the Prime Minister that despite the fact that his old body could no longer be fixed, he was still pleased that Suyang was trying so hard for his health. The servant also told Suyang on behalf of the Prime Minister that he was very sorry that he could not look at Suyang on his own, and he said that he would definitely follow his advice. After this, Suyang stood up and told the Prime Minister that he, too, hoped that the Prime Minister's condition would improve over time. Before leaving the Prime Minister's estate, Suyang told his servant that they should warm up the Prime Minister's room, but they should not overdo it, because this could lead to disastrous consequences. Suyang also told the Prime Minister's servant that it was so hot here that even the paduka board was very warm. After this, Suyang said goodbye to the Prime Minister and his servant, and he returned back to his estate. When Suyang returned to the palace, he told Sejong that it was almost impossible to cure the Prime Minister, since the main cause of his illness was his natural old age. Then Sejong thought that if they had started treating the Prime Minister at least 10 years earlier, then perhaps they could have helped him somehow. At this moment, Sejong only thought that if they could help the Prime Minister, then they could discuss and solve many more government affairs together. Sejong also began to remember the time when 10 years ago he and the Prime Minister spent days and days solving important government problems and making important decisions. During the walk, Sejong asked Suyang how the classes of his students, whom he actively trains, were going. At that moment, Suyang remembered how quickly his students get tired, but Suyang told Sejong that he had come across very talented and capable students. After this, Sejong told Suyang that he had recently met with Kim Jong, who also believed that Suyang should develop a training system for training soldiers. Sejong also asked Suyang about his plans for the Ming Empire, and Suyang said that after traveling to Beijing, he would also like to go to Hanam, one of the cities in Gyeonggi province. After Suyang said that he was going to cover almost half of Beijing, he said that the initial purpose of his trip was to develop livestock farming in Joseon. Suyang believed that the pigs in Joseon were too small, and he wanted to make sure that every person in Joseon could have the opportunity to eat enough meat. Suyang also noted that one Chinese character, which means meat, is associated specifically with a pig, and in the Ming Empire it is very easy to raise and fatten the required number of pigs. However, Sejong guessed that besides animal husbandry, Suyang had other reasons to travel halfway through the Ming Empire. At this point, Suyang believed that Sejong was not very happy about his imminent trip, since Suyang would be traveling around the Ming Empire for a whole year. Then Suyang told Sejong that in addition to livestock farming, agriculture was highly developed in the Ming Empire, which allows local residents to grow a lot of different vegetables. Suyang also said that in addition to agricultural samples, Suyang also wanted to be in Nanjing, where he wanted to get some books. Sejong then reminded Suyang that Nanjing was an ancient city with a very long and rich history, and he believed that there were indeed a lot of books there. However, Suyang told Sejong that he was almost completely confident that the head of Soragama, who invited Suyang, would definitely provide him with all the necessary books. Sejong knew that Wang Jin was so powerful that even the ministers called him father, thereby expressing their respect. Then Suyang said that if Wang Jin tried to provide proposals that were unfavorable for Joseon, he would refuse them, but otherwise he was ready to conduct mutually beneficial cooperation with him. Afterwards, Sejong remembered that Suyang just recently had a daughter, and he wondered if Suyang had discussed his trip with his family, and Suyang said that he had discussed everything with his wife. The next morning, the ship on which Suyang was going to go to the Ming Empire sailed to the Joseon pier, and the entire royal family was going to see Suyang off. Suyang's wife was very worried that she would not see her husband in the next year, but Hyun-dan was not at all upset, since due to his age he did not understand how long he would not see his father. Suyang's wife understood that her husband was carrying out matters of national importance, but she was still worried that Suyang would miss her daughter's first birthday. At this moment, Suyang began to feel a little nervous because Suyang's wife was speaking very loudly, and Suyang was worried that more and more people would look at them with incomprehension. At one point, Suyang's wife began to cry in grief, and then Suyang immediately began to calm his wife down. At this moment, Sejong was so amused watching Suyang and his wife that he couldn't even contain his laughter. After this, Lee Hyang approached Suyang and said that while he was away from Joseon, he would look after his wife and children. Suyang was very grateful to his brother for such help, and Suyang said that he couldn't wait to meet again. After this, Lee Hyang jokingly told Suyang that with his departure, Suyang decided to relieve Chan Young of his job and transfer it to Lee Hyang. Then Suyang laughed and remembered that this was Chan Young's first vacation in 15 years. Sang Young then began to thank Suyang for personally asking the king to personally grant Chan Young leave. At this moment, Hyung-dan walked up to his father with a small dumbbell in his hand to show his father that he also wanted to become as strong as his father. A second later, Suyang picked up his son and lifted him up, after which he told him that when he returned home, they would train the bench press together. At one point, Suyang remembered his conversation with Sejong, who did not understand what Suyang ultimately wanted to do, since he began to devote so much time to training, animal husbandry, and other things. Suyang then told Sejong that his dream was to make Joseon the strongest state so that no one could look down on Joseon. Soon Suyang and his team set off, and within a few minutes Pu Such-han, who worked as the royal translator, suddenly began to sneeze non-stop. Suyang was somewhat surprised that with such a physique, Such-han managed to catch a cold, and Such-han said that he spent too much time in the cold wind. Such-han also punished himself non-stop for catching a cold on such an important trip for Soo-young and all of Joseon. Then Soo-young looked at Such-han and thought that during his journey, he would have the opportunity to force Such-han to take up sports. A few hours later, Soo-young saw the coastline, which indicated that they had almost arrived in the Ming Empire. Before arriving at the port, Soo-young decided to ask his crew if the soap had spoiled during their departure. Then Lee Ge and Park Kong, who were scientists from Chipyeongjong, informed Soo-young that in such weather the soap was in excellent condition. Nam Bin, who was responsible for the safety of Soo-young and his team, also went with Soo-young. Then Soo-young said that man is the center of the world, and Soo-young wanted to get to the Ming Empire as soon as possible to see for himself. After Soo-young and his team descended from the ship, they saw in front of them a huge gate that covered their further path to Paektusan. Soo-young and his team were shocked by such a huge structure, and for a moment it seemed to them that such a structure could not be built by man. At this moment, Chang Song, who was one of the emperor's eunuchs, approached Soo-young and his team, and he was a little amused by the reaction of Soo-young and his men upon seeing the gate to the city. Chang Song was supposed to accompany Soo-young and his team around Paektusan and make sure that nothing happened to them during the escort. Suddenly, Lee Ge asked Chang Song when they would arrive at the emperor's audience, but Chang Song said that out of the entire team, Soo-young would be the only one who would be able to see the emperor in person. After this, Chang Song decided to calculate how long it would take for the emperor to personally receive Soo-young and his team, and he came to the conclusion that the emperor would receive them in 40 days, which greatly surprised Such-han. Soon, several people with large bags began to come in after Soo-young, and then Chang Song suggested that this was the very goods that Soo-young wanted to transfer to the Ming Empire. Then Chang Song approached Soo-young and told him that he recently decided to try using his soap, and he really liked it. Soo-young thanked Chang Song for such nice remarks and said that this soap is far from perfect. Chang Song was also very surprised when Soo-young said that he improved his soap, making its aroma even more pleasant. After that, Soo-young took one of the bars of soap, showed it to Chang Song and said that he had prepared more than 2,000 pounds of soap for the Ming Empire. Chang Song decided to smell the soap to evaluate its smell, and he was pleasantly surprised by such a pleasant combination of the aroma of flowers and ginseng. After that, Chang Song put down the soap and told Soo-young that he was pleasantly surprised that a country like Joseon could supply such a quality product. After that, Chang Song began to look at Soo-young with a bit of whim and think that Soo-young was like a fearless general in his physique. Suddenly, unexpectedly for Soo-young, Chang Song began to touch Soo-young's shoulder and tell him that his shoulders were as strong and wide as those of the god Viradhak. Suddenly Soo-young was shocked by Chang Song's sudden behavior, and then Such-han politely asked Chang Song to stop showing such disgusting behavior. Soo-young soon found himself at Emperor Jingtong's palace to greet him in person. After the greeting, the emperor told Soo-young that he had heard that Sejong had very talented sons, and he said that he also tried using soap. The emperor said that he was amazed at how easily all the dirt came off his skin after the soap, but he was even more surprised that this soap was created by Sejong's youngest son. The emperor also told Soo-young that he was pleased that Soo-young and his team had brought 2,000 pounds of soap, and the emperor wanted to talk to Soo-young about establishing trade ties. After this, Soo-young thanked the emperor, and at that moment it seemed to Soo-young that the situation suddenly became somehow hostile and tense. After Soo-young left the emperor's palace, he noticed that the emperor's servants around him began to look at him and his team with disgust. At this point, the servants began to discuss how much the emperor's eunuchs who accompanied Soo-young and his team stank. Soo-young continued to walk along the road, trying not to think about why these people were looking at him with such disgust. Soon Soo-young and his team reached the exit, where they were met by the emperor's eunuchs, who were waiting for them. Soo-young told the eunuchs that thanks to them, he was able to meet the emperor in person, and he told the eunuchs that thanks to them, he would be able to get an audience in just 10 days. Soo-young also said that their future descendants would sing about this great event, but Chang Song suddenly interrupted Soo-young and asked him if he knew who he was talking to now. Soo-young said that he had already heard rumors that Sorgham was led by a certain Dain, whom ministers and officials respectfully called father. Dain then lowered his fan slightly and told Soo-young that he admired Soo-young's intelligence. After this, a couple of eunuchs told Soo-young that they really liked the soap that Soo-young had previously sent them, and they were very happy when they learned that Suyang had brought a shipment of soap weighing 2,000 pounds. Then the eunuchs asked Suyang how much it cost him to create this soap, and Suyang said that the price very much depended on the ingredients. Suyang said that soap with ginseng scent costs 10 mali, and soap with incense costs 6 mali. Then Dine calculated that 600 grams of soap costs about 40 grams of silver, and then Dine asked Suyang how he produces his soap. Such Han thought that this was a very mean question on Dayan's part, since he believed that Dayan was going to steal the method of making soap and start selling it himself. However, Suyang had no problem telling Dayan that first, to make soap, the Joseon people collect seaweed from Hamildo Island and begin to dry it. Then even Dayan was somewhat surprised that Suyang would so easily tell him the secret of making soap, without fear that Dayan might simply steal his recipe. However, after this, Dayan told Suyang that the emperor had recently imposed a ban on the extraction of sea products, due to which they could not independently obtain seaweed and dry it to make soap. It was for this reason that the Ming Empire had to ask Joseon to supply them with soap, which greatly reassured Su-han. Then Dayan asked Suyang if it would be possible to increase the production rate of new batches of fragrant soap for their further delivery to the Ming Empire. Then Suyang asked Dayan how much soap the empire needed, and Dayan said that 6 tons of soap needed to be brought to the empire, which amazed Suyang very much. Dayan also demanded that despite the increase in production, the quality must be equally high, and even the eunuchs found this to be very difficult. After that, Dayan removed the fan from his face and told Suyang that when concluding a contract, representatives of different parties must look each other in the face. Dayan closed his fan, showed his face to Suyang, and introduced himself as Wang Jin, the eunuch of Soragama. After this, Wang Jin told Suyang that their deal was successful, and then he offered his help to Suyang in whatever he needed. Suyang told Wang Jin that he had come to the Ming Empire to bring them their products. Then Wang Jin asked Suyang if he could bring a batch of soap to the empire if Wang Jin gave him 2 tons of silver. At one moment, Suyang and Such Han could not believe that Wang Jin could give them 2 tons of silver right now. Then Suyang thought that he should not think about silver, since he believed that soon crops and livestock would be much more valuable than silver. After his thoughts, Suyang told Wang Jin that Joseon would do everything possible to bring more soap to the empire. Wang Jin then told Suyang and his team that he would do everything possible to make their trip as pleasant as possible, after which Wang Jin and his eunuchs left the grounds of the emperor's palace. Once Wang Jin and the rest of the eunuchs left, Such Han told Suyang that he probably understood why the eunuchs were actually so interested in fragrant soap. Such Khan told Suyang that in the empire, eunuchs are completely deprived of their male sexual organ, which shocked Suyang very much. Such Khan also said that because of this, the eunuchs cannot control the process of urination, which is why the eunuchs always had a very strong and disgusting smell. It was at this moment that Suyang realized why the eunuchs were so interested in supplying soap to the empire. After Suyang and his team left the territory of the emperor's palace, a luxurious carriage drove up to them. Soon 3 people got out of the carriage, who were just looking for Suyang and his team. Then one of the people who got out of the carriage told Suyang and his team that Wang Jin himself had told him to personally ensure that Suyang and his team's journey was as pleasant as possible. At that moment, Suyang and his comrades saw in front of them a luxurious cart, which was very similar to the cart that the emperor's son himself rode. Suyang could not believe that he was actually allowed to use this cart, to which the imperial servant told Suyang that the emperor's son's cart was twice as large, and that Suyang had nothing to worry about. Soon, Suyang and his group boarded the carriage, and everyone was amazed that this carriage could travel at 37 miles per hour so easily. However, due to the high speed and dusty road, a lot of dust got into the cart, which made it very difficult for Suyang and his group to breathe. At this moment, Suyang thought that roads with special coating began to be produced only in the 20th century, if we do not take into account the roads that were made in ancient Rome. During the ride, Suyang decided not to waste his time, and he decided to start training his legs by leaning his back against the wall of the cart and holding his legs in one position. Tired, Xingqiu did not understand what Suyang was doing, and he decided to ask him what he was doing now. Suyang told Xingqiu that respect for one's ancestors is expressed in the fact that a person should not feel sorry for himself, and give himself concessions. Soo-young also told Xing-chu that a person should never neglect the body that his parents gave him. Soo-young also drew Xing-chu's attention to how large and noticeable his belly fat was. Especially unpleasant for Soo-young to look at Xing-chu's third chin, which also appeared due to excess weight. Besides, Soo-young noticed that it was so difficult for Xing-chu to walk that after taking just a few steps, he immediately began to sweat heavily. Xing-chu could not say anything in his own defense, since he himself understood perfectly well that everything that Soo-young said about him was true. However, Soo-young told Xing-chu that despite his grave condition, he could help him. Soo-young told Xing-chu that they had to travel another 380 miles before they reached Chang'an, and they would cover this distance by cart in only 12 days. Then Soo-young suggested that Xing-chu spend these 12 days to the benefit of his body, in order to at least get him in shape a little. Xing-chu understood that he would not be able to refuse Soo-young, and he also understood that for him this would be the most difficult 12 days of his life. After 12 days, Soo-young and his group arrived in Chang'an, and during this time, Xing-chu actually managed to lose some of his excess weight. Soo-young was very grateful to the imperial servant for his help, to which the servant himself said that he was just doing his job. Soon, Soo-young was approached by one of the high-ranking officials of Chang'an, who was very happy to see Soo-young and his group. This official believed that Soo-young and his group had come a long way to get here, and then he invited Soo-young and his group to relax with a meal. Soon, the official escorted Soo-young and his group to one of the most luxurious and expensive restaurants, which is visited exclusively by officials or representatives of the imperial family. First of all, Soo-young and his group were given portions of unusual noodles, which contained a lot of meat, vegetables and some spices. However, once Soo-young decided to examine the noodles, he noticed that the noodles were somewhat similar in appearance to potato skins. Then one of the scientists from Soo-young's group said that this is not just noodles, but traditional doxiamin, the recipe for which was invented during the Yuan dynasty. After everyone had finished their noodles, the table was served with assorted meats, which included pork and beef. One of the scientists from Soo-young's group decided to try the meat first, and he thought that the pork was very tasty, while the beef just tasted terrible. After tasting the meat, the scientist said that the beef tasted so bad that it would seem that the cow used for the dish had suffered from improper feeding. While this scientist was describing the taste of beef, Soo-young noticed the evil and intimidating look of one of the cooks who was watching Soo-young and his group eat. However, despite such an unpleasant taste of beef, the cold cuts seemed very tasty to him, after which the rest of the guests also began to eat. As the evening progressed, more and more different dishes appeared on the table, which Soo-young and his group ate with pleasure, praising the chef's efforts. Meanwhile, one of the eunuchs arrived to Wang Jin to tell him about how Soo-young and his group reached Chang'an. Jin also learned from this eunuch that the officials of Chang'an showed utmost cordiality and hospitality to the guests, and that they asked Wang Jin to personally speak with the emperor about their partnership. After this eunuch told Wang Jin everything, he decided to ask him what was the reason that Wang Jin cared so much about commoners like Soo-young and his group. At that moment, Wang Jin took one liang in his hand and told the eunuch that he once had to become a eunuch, since until that moment, he had nothing that would help him survive. After Wang Jin finally became an influential eunuch, he wanted to achieve such greatness with which he could give people what they really needed. At this moment, Wang Jin briefly looked at his face in the reflection of the liang, after which he simply threw the liang out the window. At this moment, Wang Jin wanted more and more every second to see what the second son of King Joseon could do. The next day, the farmers of Chang'an showed Soo-young and his group the pigs they were keeping for their sustenance. Soo-young was pleasantly surprised at how large the pigs were in Chang'an, as they were almost the same size as the wild boars he had previously hunted. The farmer also told Soo-young that their pigs could reach a weight of more than 200 kyns in 2 years. Then Soo-young asked the farmer to cut one piece weighing 1 kyn from the pig to ensure the quality of the meat. Xing-chu told Soo-young that he didn't fully understand why they should worry about the quality of the pork, since he believed that even if they just brought the pig to Joseon, it would be in great demand. Soo-young told Xing-chu that if they brought different types of pigs to Joseon, the pigs might have their blood shifted, causing the subsequent offspring of those pigs to not be as useful as they could be. After a couple of minutes, a small piece of meat was cut from one of the pigs so that Soo-young and his team could evaluate the quality of the meat. Soon Soo-young and his group arrived in the city of Luoyang, whose population was comparable to that of Beijing. Walking the streets of Luoyang, Suyang and Xingqiu turned their attention to a local man who was selling some pills. Xingqiu heard the man saying something about Josian, but due to the large crowd of people, he could not hear the man. Xingqiu listened and heard the man telling people that if they bought his pills from him, they would become as strong as Suyang. SZC Han was greatly outraged by how this vile man was using his ginseng pills and the name of Prince Suyang to make as much money as possible from naive people. Xingqiu was also outraged by the fact that this man claims that Suyang himself gave him these pills, while they did not bring any miracle pills. However, this news not only did not anger Suyang, but also made him very happy, as he was pleased to realize that in just a month of his stay in the Ming dynasty, rumors were already beginning to spread about him. After this, Suyang immediately took off all his outer clothing to show off his strong body to the locals. Xingqiu was afraid that Suyang's actions might lead to unpleasant consequences, and he asked him not to do anything stupid. Suyang then calmed down Xingqiu by telling him that he did not want to ruin his father's good name, and that he just wanted to show people his muscles. At this point, the man began to assure people that if they ate 100 of his pills, they would immediately become incredibly strong, and that Suyang himself gave him these pills. After this, a large man stood next to the pill seller, and the seller told people that this man ate 50 of his pills, which immediately gave him such a strong body. At the same moment, the seller was shocked when a man with large muscles began to approach him. The people next to Suyang looked at him and couldn't believe that a person could actually have such a physique. The pill seller told Suyang that he was willing to give him 50 of his pills, to which Suyang told the seller that he didn't need his pills at all. After that, Suyang told the pill seller and his partner that he could easily defeat this big man, and then the seller realized that Suyang would now bring them to light. Suyang also told the seller that he was surprised that he did not recognize him as Prince Suyang, who, according to the seller, provided him with these pills. At this moment, the seller could not contain his anger, and then he asked Suyang who he was and why should he suddenly recognize him. Then Suyang tensed his muscles as hard as possible, and told the pill seller that he was the same Prince Suyang from Josian, which scared the seller very much. The pill seller was at a loss, and then he told his assistant to try to defeat Suyang. A second later, Suyang and the pill seller's partner began to fight against each other, hoping to knock their opponent to the ground. Even though the pill seller's partner was much larger than Suyang, he began to quickly lose strength, and he could not understand how this was even possible. After a couple of seconds, Suyang knocked the pill seller's partner to the ground and told him that this was possible due to the fact that his muscles were many times stronger. After the fight, Suyang told the pill seller's partner that he must first learn to lift 1,000 kg in weights in 3 basic exercises, and only then can he fight him again. At that moment, the pill seller and his partner realized that they had made a big mistake, after which they immediately ran away. After the pill seller and his partner escaped, Suyang strained his muscles as hard as possible to show the locals what Josian muscle strength was all about. In addition to the local residents, one old man began to stare at Suyang, who immediately took out his ink and paper and began to draw the image of Suyang on paper. The old man needed to create a new Buddha statue for Long'en, and he decided that Suyang's image would be suitable as an image for the statue. After a couple of minutes, Suyang finished showing off his muscles to the locals, and soon the rest of his group, who had been looking for Suyang and Xingqiu for a long time, came running to him. However, Suyang said that it was too early to decide which pigs they would take to Josian, and he decided to find out what his partners could find out. Then one of Suyang's partners took out several books and said that perhaps these old books could be useful to them in Josian. Suyang's second partner showed the seeds of some varieties of food plants, but this partner was afraid that these seeds would not be able to grow in Josian. Suyang was very happy to see what his partners were able to get, and he was especially surprised by the books, which turned out to be a new chronicle of Beach. At that moment, one of Suyang's partners looked at him and saw the difference between a warrior and a civil servant, trying to understand why these books attracted Suyang's attention so much. Suddenly Suyang turned his attention to a book about General Han Xing from the time of the Chu Kingdom, and this partner immediately wanted to familiarize himself with this book. Soon Suyang and his group were able to find everything they were looking for, and Suyang decided that they should move on. A few days later, Suyang and his team arrived at the Hongzhe Pier, where for the first time in their lives they saw a turtle ship, which the Chinese were very proud of. At that time, the turtle ship was the largest ship in the world, and in the entire Ming Empire there was only one such ship, which was used in expeditions under the command of the eunuch Chanhua. Seeing this ship, Suyang decided that when he was in Nanjing, where this ship was created, he would definitely visit the shipyard where this ship was designed and built. At that moment, Xinchu turned to Suyang and told him that 3 whole months had passed since they left Joseon, and Suyang said that he already missed Joseon and his family. Meanwhile in Joseon, Sejong summoned Li Hyang to discuss with him the issue of creating firearms. Li Hyang informed Sejong that he and his best forges in Joseon were successfully working on the creation of firearms, hoping that their warriors would soon use them for military purposes. Sejong was a little worried that this weapon was only used to intimidate the enemy, and he hoped that this weapon would make their army stronger. Li Hyang reassured his father and told him that he had decided to make this weapon a little longer. Li Hyang explained to his father that he decided to do this so that the warriors could inflict damage on the enemy from an even greater distance. However, at that moment Sejong remembered an incident in which a man in the north was shot with a similar weapon, and the next day he woke up unharmed. Then Li Hyang told Sejong that at that time they used arrows that could not penetrate the defense of this warrior. However, Li Hyang decided to use lead bullets as projectiles, which can easily penetrate the enemy's defense and cause significant damage to him. Hyang also said that he and his blacksmiths are trying to find new uses for the molds that Suyang used to create his barbell. Meanwhile, one of the government employees named Tae Ho Gun was in a local bar drinking sake. Previously, Ho Gun waited for a long time for the moment when he would be on vacation, but even when he received his vacation, he could not forget about Sejong. A man bringing him a drink passed by the table where Ho Gun was sitting, and he thought that Ho Gun was talking to him. However, a second later, the man saw a small homemade doll on Ho Gong's desk that he was talking to. Soon Ho Gong drank so much booze that he began to imagine this homemade doll talking to him. Soon another bar worker passed by Ho Gun's table, and he asked him for what purpose he came to their establishment, to which Ho Gun only asked the worker to bring him fried fish. Soon a plate of fried fish appeared on Ho Gong's table, which looked very appetizing, and Ho Gong immediately began to eat. However, as soon as Ho Gong tried the fish, he thought that the fish had spoiled slightly, and then the worker said that he would now bring Ho Gong's salad instead of fish. At this point, Ho Gong believed that he could solve the problem of spoiled fish so that it would last longer. Then Ho Gong remembered how Suyang created an apparatus for producing alcohol, which was first used to treat wounds. Then Ho Gun asked the bar worker how long ago this fish had been caught, to which the bar worker said that it had lain at the bottom of the boat for 2 whole days, after which it was cooked. Then Ho Gong thought that if you rip open the belly of the fish, take out all the insides and immediately salt it, then such fish will be fresh for another 2 whole weeks. Soon Ho Gun left the bar and went fishing with the local fishermen. This time, the fishermen used a special water lifting device, with which they caught much more fish than the fishermen had caught before. After the fishermen caught the required amount of fish, Ho Gong ordered them to lay out all the fish, cut the belly of all the fish, clean the fish from the entrails and immediately salt it. This time, Ho Gong used the same operating mechanism for his device that Suyang used for his overhead pulley machine. When the fishermen cleaned all the fish from the entrails, Ho Gong told them that if they did everything correctly, the fish would be suitable for consumption for another 2 whole weeks after it was caught. The fishermen were also very surprised at how many fish they were able to catch in such a short period of time. One of the fishermen told Ho Gong that before the ship could be overloaded with just 100 fish caught, but now they can easily catch and take away more than 1,000 fish. Ho Gun said that as the catch increases, the required area for storing fish will also increase, and with proper distribution, the amount of fresh fish for all of Joseon can be significantly increased. However, at this moment, Ho Gong believed that if they had a boat to go out to the open sea, they could catch even more fish. Meanwhile, Suyang's ambassadors told Ma Ilu to come to the royal palace to receive the royal decree. The ambassadors informed Ma Il that the first training ground would soon be established in Joseon, and Suyang wanted Ma Il to be one of the first people to train the newcomers. Ma Il was shocked when he learned that he would have to train a group of 20 candidates, each of whom was a member of one or another noble family. Ma Il also learned that these candidates had failed the official rank exam, and Ma Il felt that this would make his task much more difficult. A month after the start of training, exhausted from training, Ma Il began to remember with warmth in his soul the days when he trained with Suyang. At this moment, Sang Gong arrived to Ma Il, who clearly saw how Ma Il realized how difficult it was for Suyang to train him. Sang Gun was also one of the trainers at the new training ground, and the students happily listened to Sang Gun and did whatever he told them. However, when Ma Il tried to teach his students, no one listened to him or took him seriously. Sang Gun also said that if these students failed to master their lessons, they would be urgently sent to Hamgildo, and judging by their behavior, they simply did not realize what awaited them if they failed. At this moment, Ma Il felt a little sorry for his students, since they do not know what will happen to them if they do not listen to him, and he began to think about how to make his students listen to him. At this moment, Li Hyang arrived at the training ground to personally make sure that if Ma Il's students did not listen to him, they would be sent to Hamgildo. Ma Il looked at Li Hyang and couldn't believe that Sejong's eldest son was able to pump up his muscles so much. Then Li Hyang suggested moving on to practical training for students since they refused to listen to theory. At this point, Ma Il apologized to Sang Gong and told him that he could no longer watch the common people suffer. Then Li Hyang told Ma Il that those people who lack perseverance in training need to take up the barbell to strengthen their will. The next day, Ma Il had his students lift heavy weights while asking the students various questions about training their bodies. Ma Il asked questions to one of his students, but this student could not answer a single question from Ma Il, which made Ma Il very upset. Ma Il decided that if his student could not answer his question, then he needed to increase the weight of the student's barbell, and then Ma Il ordered another pancake to be hung on the student's barbell. Before Ma Il increased the weight of the barbell, his student told Ma Il that he now understood well what Ma Il had told him. At this moment, Ma Il believed that the level of understanding and talkativeness directly depended on the weight of his barbell, and then Ma Il threw another pancake onto his student's barbell. At this moment, one of the students tried to support his friend, telling him that he would definitely endure this torment. At this moment, this student was struggling to hold the barbell, and he thought that he would not be the only student who would have to endure this. This student believed that not only he, but also other students who would be here after him would also know all this pain, and since then this method of teaching was called the teachings to which iron provides answers. Closer to April, Suyang and his group arrived in Nanjing, and when Suyang found himself in this city for the first time, he believed that this city had almost the same crowd of people as in Beijing. Walking through the streets of Nanjing, one of Suyang's partners noticed that local residents had already begun to sell cucumbers, while in Joseon at that time they were just beginning to harvest rice. Then Suyang believed that growing and selling various vegetables was many times more profitable than selling rice alone. The fact is that after the invasion of the army of Red Turbans and the attack of Japanese pirates, the lands of Joseon were devastated, and Joseon had no choice but to grow rice. However, despite Joseon's current position in the food industry, Suyang believed that Joseon would soon also grow a variety of vegetables, both for local residents and for sale. Soon, Suyang and his group went to Gangnam, and they decided that this was a great opportunity to try various local dishes, so they went to one of the local restaurants. As soon as Suyang and his group arrived at the restaurant, they sat down at one of the tables and asked its owners to prepare something special for them, throwing a couple of silver liangs on the table. The restaurant owners were shocked as it was the first time they had seen one of their customers give them such a generous payment, so they immediately went to the kitchen to prepare food for Suyang and his group. First of all, Suyang and his group were brought several portions of fried carp in a creamy sauce, and if you touch the head of this fish, it will immediately jump. After Suyang and his group ate their carp, they were immediately served roasted pig, and the restaurant owners even completely deboned it. After Suyang and his group ate roasted pig, they were brought sea turtle soup. Suyen and his group were very well fed and they all enjoyed the food that was prepared for them. The owners of the restaurant were very tired while preparing all these delicious dishes, but they were sure that all their efforts were worth the income they received today. After a hearty meal, Suyang decided that it was time to meet with a very important person. After the meal, Suyang and his group went to the Joseon shipyard in Nanjing to meet the man who created the turtle ship. Suyang soon met with Ban Kilju, who created the turtle ship, to ask him some questions about his profession. Kilju did not recognize Suyang, and he believed that new porters had arrived to load and unload the ship with various items for export. However, Suyang told Kilju that he was the prince of Joseon, and Kilju immediately apologized to him for his words. Kil believed that he had almost committed a terrible crime, to which Suyang only asked Kilju about creating a vessel for the eunuch Chanhwa. Then Kilju told Suyang about how he created this huge and majestic ship, which he set sail. Kilju also said that this ship was his last achievement, since they soon stopped conducting expeditions, which is why the demand for such ships has dropped significantly. After this, Kilju began to create ordinary merchant ships in order to continue to earn his living. After this, Kilju, with resentment in his voice, said that for a master like him, there is nothing more important than striving for grandiose achievements in his business. Suyang listened carefully to Kilju, after which he asked him what other ships were created under his leadership. Kilju then spoke about how, in addition to the turtle ship, he also created a ship like Guisong, which was also famous in Joseon. Suyang then asked Kilju if he would like to start designing new majestic ships again, since he believed that Kilju was wasting his talents here. Kilju bowed down to Suyang and thanked him for inviting him to go to Joseon and build his ships there. Kilju believed that for a real man, nothing is more important than creating ships to conquer the vast oceans, and he believed that in Joseon he would create smaller ships. At that moment, Suyang realized that all masters of their craft were exactly the same, after which he put his hand under his robe. After a couple of seconds, Suyang showed Kilju a diagram of a ship that had only one sail and a few oars, and Kilju believed that it was an ordinary fishing boat. A little later, Kilju turned his attention to the lifting mechanism, and he asked Suyang what it was and what it was intended for. Then Suyang told Kilju that thanks to this mechanism it would be possible to raise a catch that would be 4 times larger than what could fit on a similar boat. Kilju thought that this was a great idea, since only one mast would be needed to raise one such catch. Ju then told Suyang that he was unlikely to be able to recreate such a boat, but he could still figure out how to design the individual parts of the boat. Then Suyang told Kilju that if the small boat of one master can surpass the large boat of another master, then this indicates the true skill of the first master. Suyang told Kilju that he could think about his proposal for the next 10 days until they returned to Joseon, after which Suyang and his group moved on. Soon Suyang and his group went to one of the farms in Nanjing to evaluate the local vegetables. Suyang and his group really liked the cabbage that grows here, since it was not only very large, but also very tasty, and if you pickle it, you can eat it all winter. Suyang also believed that this cabbage was a very distant relative of the cabbage that he ate in a past life. After this, Suyang turned to the owner of this farm to buy some seeds of this cabbage from him. The owner of this farm immediately brought Suyang and his group several bags of seeds from his cabbage, after which Suyang and his group moved on. Soon Suyang went to another farm where pigs were raised, and Suyang wanted to ask the owner of the farm about his pigs. Then the farm owner said that his pigs could gain more than 240 kyn in weight in less than a year, while pigs in Joseon could only gain 70 kyn in 2 years. Then Suyang told the farm owner that he would like to buy 100 of his pigs from him, to which the farm owner said that this would be very difficult. However, Suyang was ready to pay any price for these pigs, after which he took out a lot of silver liang from his savings. After some trading, the farm owner was going to give Suyang 100 pigs, including 20 males and 80 females. That evening, Suyang realized that he had done everything he wanted to do during his journey, and he decided that his journey was coming to an end and that it was time for him to return to Joseon. Suyang also had almost no liang left, which Wang Jin had given to him, but he believed that this amount could easily be obtained from further soap exports. At this moment, Shinchu arrived at Suyang to inform him of the arrival of Bang Kilju, who nevertheless decided to go to Joseon with his group. This news made Suyang happy, and he decided that it was time to return to Joseon. Before setting sail, Suyang decided to make sure that his servants transferred all the things to the ship, which also included more than 400 books. Suyang was a little worried that due to the large number of books, it would be very difficult to fit them on the ship with the people. At this moment, Shinchu began to wonder how Joseon would react to everything that they brought from the Ming Empire, to which Suyang said that there would definitely be a large number of people in Jipyeongyang. After some time, one of Sejong's ambassadors wanted to inform him about some sudden misfortune. The ambassador informed Sejong that there was now great unrest in Waksh due to one sudden incident. Sejong was somewhat disappointed that he was distracted at this very moment, since he was currently trying to break the deadlift record. At first, the ambassador informed Sejong that Suyang had returned to Joseon, which made Sejong very happy, but he did not understand how this was related to the incident in Watch. Then the ambassador told Sejong that all the chaos began to happen because of the escaped pigs. Hearing this, Sejong told his ambassador that there was no need to create such a strong panic over a small pile of piglets. However, the ambassador told Sejong that the escaped pigs weighed at least 240 kyn, which greatly surprised Sejong himself. Meanwhile, the guards tried to catch and calm the escaped pigs, and they were amazed that each pig weighed almost as much as one adult and well-fed boar. The pigs were so large that one pig could easily frighten not only the guard on the horse, but also the horse itself. Also, these pigs were so large and aggressive that they could also attack a person. However, when one of the pigs tried to attack one of the guards, someone managed to grab the pig right by the tail and stop it. Suyen appeared with his group, who were able to catch and stop several pigs at once. Soon, Suyang and his group finally managed to calm the angry pigs and bring them to the Joseon farm. Sejong looked at these pigs and thought that in their temperament and aggression they were more reminiscent of wild animals. At this point, Sejong handed one of the pigs some food to feed and calm it down. Sejong believed that these pigs had come a very long way to end up in Joseon, and he decided to show the pigs that they had nothing to fear. After a second, this pig calmed down and began to eat food from Sejong's hands. After Sejong fed the pigs, he believed that due to their size, they would not have to worry about meat shortages in Joseon. At this moment, the pigs began to grunt together and cheerfully, thinking that Sejong did not pose any threat to them. However, at the same moment, Sejong said that tonight the chefs would cook the most plump pig for dinner. After that, Sejong and Suyang left the pig farm, and Suyang informed his father that he also brought many books since many books from Jipyeongjang were lost. Sejong told Suyang that he had done a lot for Joseon, and he could ask Sejong for any reward without any problem, to which Suyang said that he realized something during his journey. Suyang believed that if they used the same farming methods as in the Ming Empire, it would have a positive effect on the nutrition of all Joseon residents. After this, Suyang introduced Sejong to Kilju, who would now reside in Joseon and create his own ships for him. Sejong promised Kilju that he would provide him with all the conditions for a comfortable stay in Joseon, for which Kilju was very grateful to Sejong. After that, Suyang went to the new training ground, where Ma Il and his students were already waiting for him. The first thing Suyang did was praise Ma Il for doing his job so well. In response to this, Ma Il said that being a teacher is much more difficult than being a student. Ma Il also said that training is only a teaching about honoring one's parents, since a person's origin does not affect anything, and Suyang believed that the students did not listen to Ma Il. At this moment, Suyang looked at one of the weights that was standing near the entrance to the training ground, and he decided to apply a slightly different method of training to Ma Il's students. After this, Suyang told Ma Il's students that they would now do CrossFit to add some variety to their training. Suyang then suggested that Ma Il's students switch between several types of exercises to relieve them of depressing thoughts. First, Suyang decided to tell his students about an exercise called burpee, which he himself invented during his travels through the Ming Empire. Suyang also suggested that the students perform several jumps over a log after the burpee. Besides, Suyang decided that the students should try performing arm swings with a 20 kyn kettlebell. After swinging their arms, students should perform several squats without additional weight. The students noticed that in these exercises they would not have to lift weights, and they were happy about these exercises. Suyang also told the students that if they could complete each of these exercises for 2 sets, then they could finish their training for the day. At this moment, Suyang looked at the joyful faces of the students and believed that a strong hurricane would soon begin, but the students did not understand what Suyang meant by the hurricane. After just a couple of exercises, the students began to get very tired and feel severe muscle pain. At this moment, Suyang observed one of the students, who began to complain that he was going to throw up due to extreme fatigue. In response to this, Suyang told this student that he should not hold back his urge to vomit, and that he urgently needed to vomit, after which he should continue to train. The students decided that this training would be the most difficult training they had ever done. After 6 months of training, Suyang told the students to familiarize themselves with some books and focus on their teachings. Suyang believed that even 6 months later, the students still had the same poor physical preparation, and he believed that they should invest their energy in something useful and necessary. However, the students, exhausted and badly battered by training, did not understand how they could read books in such a difficult condition. Then Soo-young showed the students Ma-ila and San-gong, who were able to become so strong through training and reading books. After training, Soo-young went to Jipyeongjiang to study with his brothers the new books he had brought from the Ming Empire. Yan Pyong, who was Sejong's youngest son, was amazed that Soo-young was able to bring Cho Soo-ryang's manuscripts to Joseon. Soo-young also told Pyong that he was also able to get Oh-yang's work Xunya and Yenjin-ching, and Pyong couldn't wait to read all these books as soon as possible. Li Hyang looked at the happy Pyong and thought that he would also want to become an imperial ambassador like Soo-young. Pyong told Li Hyang that he would really like to visit the lands of the Ming Empire. Pyong also said that their mother and father were pleased with the results of Soo-young's journey, and they asked Pyong if he would like to go on a similar trip next time. At this moment, Pyong turned to face his older brothers, and he noticed that they had a very unusual expression on their faces. Soo-young then told Pyong that Shin-chu's physique had changed greatly during his journey, while Pyong had an extremely weak physique. Lee Kian also added that this kind of travel requires good endurance and physical fitness. In response to this, Pyong said that his arms were so weak that he could not lift the kind of pile of iron that they lift during training. Then Soo-young invited Li Hyang to start training Pyong together, and Li Hyang said that he would be happy to help Pyong pump up his muscles. Pyong told his brothers that there was no need to train him, but Soo-young and Li Hyang insisted on training with Pyong. Meanwhile, one of the imperial blacksmiths was able to create his own firearms, and Li Hyang wanted to test it in action. This firearm was very similar to a regular metal pole wrapped in rope, and in the middle of this pole there was a small lever that, when pressed, fired a shot. As soon as Li Hyang pulled the trigger, a special mechanism was activated, thanks to which a small lead projectile flew out of the muzzle at high speed. Li Hyang said that such a weapon could easily penetrate leather armor at long range and penetrate iron armor at close range. All this was observed by one of Wang Xin's spies, who wrote down on paper everything he learned. Meanwhile, one of Wang Xin's ambassadors reported that their spy had no problems completing his mission at the moment. Wang Xin also noticed that Prince Soo-young was a very smart and inventive person. After this, Wang Xin told the ambassador that he would pay him 5 liang if he described in his letter as many details as possible about Soo-young's new inventions. Xin also told the ambassador that he would give him additional liang, the number of which would depend on how thoroughly his spy sketched and described Soo-young's new inventions. At that moment, Li Hyang told Soo-young that in order to neutralize the enemy with such a weapon, a warrior only needs to be 180 meters away from the target. After that, Li Hyang showed how to hold the weapon on the shoulder while firing. You can also try holding this weapon with your chin to improve the weapon's accuracy, but it will be difficult for an untrained warrior to hold it in this position. Then Li Hyang decided to hold the weapon between his hand and his side so that it would not move in any way. Soo-young looked at this weapon and thought that it was ahead of its time, since such weapons appeared only during the reign of the Seonjo dynasty. Soo-young also believed that such weapons could be useful during sieges or assaults. Li Hyang said that he did not intend these weapons for siege use, since he created them for palace guards. Then Soo-young told Li Hyang that this weapon was not suitable for close combat. First, Soo-young fired another shot, after which he became convinced that this weapon could indeed easily pierce both wood and iron. However, despite the penetrating ability of the weapon, it had some problems with accuracy, since this weapon was extremely inconvenient to aim, and the projectile could fly past the target. Li Hyang considered that an ordinary soldier might indeed have problems with this weapon, and he considered that he would have to reduce the size and penetrating power of the weapon. After this, Li Hyang tried to understand how to improve the accuracy of the weapon, and he decided to ask Soo-young how one could learn to aim with this weapon. At this moment, Soo-young wanted to understand how to aim this weapon, but he heard the rustling of a spy in the bushes, which distracted him from his thoughts. At first, Soo-young tried to understand what made this rustling noise, but after a couple of seconds he decided that it was just his imagination. After this, Soo-young went to one of his partners, with whom he traveled throughout the Ming Empire, and at the moment he was improving his crossbow. At this moment, Soo-young's partner was just improving his crossbow, and he wanted to show the result of his work to Soo-young. Soo-young wanted to show Li Hyang, using the example of a crossbow, what exactly was the problem with his new weapon. First, Soo-young takes good aim with the crossbow before firing. A second after the shot, the arrow flew right to the point at which Soo-young was aiming. At this moment, Li Hyang understood exactly how to solve the problem of the accuracy of his firearms. Then Su-young explained that the accuracy of the shot would greatly increase if the eye and the weapon were at the same level. Su-yen also considered that if the shooter aimed with one hand, it would be difficult for him to light the fuse of the gun to fire. In addition, the enemy will have enough time to approach the warrior and neutralize him even before the warrior has time to fire a shot. Then Li Hyang believed that if they managed to combine his firearms with Su-young's partner's crossbow, they would be able to create an excellent weapon. After this, Su-young apologized to his partner for having to postpone the idea of his crossbow, to which his partner said that he would be happy to help Su-young and Li Hyang improve their weapons. Su-yen believed that after a few shots the warrior would lose strength to fire further shots and injure his face. Then Su-young's partner suggested stretching a wooden beam and attaching it to the shoulder, which Li Hyang said that in this case, the helmet could be damaged, and that the direction and location of the smoke should be changed. Hyang also suggested attaching a dagger to the end of the barrel in case the enemy was too close. 3 months later, Su-young and Li Hyang had finished designing their first prototype firearm, and they wanted to show it in action. Sejong was eager to see the results of his son's work in practice. Before Su-young and Li Hyang demonstrated the performance of their weapons, Sejong ordered all the military officials to gather in the palace so that they too could evaluate their work. Soon all the military officials arrived at the demonstration, and Li Hyang ordered one of the soldiers to prepare the weapon for testing. First, the soldier poured some gunpowder into the gun and pushed it as deep into the barrel as possible, after which he put one shell into the barrel of the gun. Military officials looked at how Hyang was preparing to fire the first shot, and they felt that such preparation for one shot was too loud. Also, military officials believed that these shooters lacked combat experience and discipline. Meanwhile, the soldier completed his training, and Li Hyang ordered him to shoot at the target. At that moment, the soldier took aim and pulled the trigger, after which a small projectile flew out of the gun. After the shot, another soldier approached the target to check where the first soldier hit, and his shell hit almost the center of the target. However, after the shot, the military officials immediately began to laugh due to the fact that this soldier spent so much time on just one shot. At this point, many military officials felt that such weapons took too long to hit the enemy, and they did not understand where the gun could be used. However, one military official said that in order to have any impact on the enemy, soldiers would need at least 10 of their conventional weapons, while this gun could easily penetrate the enemy's defenses. After this, a second prototype of a firearm was brought to the palace, which was designed for an even longer attack radius. As soon as the second warrior raised his gun, the military officials immediately became afraid, since they believed that if this gun was larger than the previous one, then its shells could cause even more heavy damage. Meanwhile, the soldier managed to fire a second gun, the shot of which was even louder than the shot of the previous gun. Even though the soldier was standing further away from the target when the second shot was fired, the shell hit approximately the same point as the previous soldier. Despite the fact that this gun fired further, military officials believed that this gun would have to be reloaded for a long time, since in the same time you could shoot 3 arrows from a bow. Military officials also began to joke that this gun was only intended to start running away from the enemy immediately after the first shot. After the soldiers demonstrated the second gun, Sejong asked Li Hyang to approach him to ask him some questions about his invention. The first thing Sejong said was that it was difficult for him to consider these guns to be at least somehow useful, since both of these guns were much inferior to the bow in speed. Then Sejong asked Li Hyang to explain to him what exactly these guns were intended for. Li Hyang told his father that the first gun was a replacement for the bow, since in order to learn how to shoot a bow, you need to spend more than 10 years of training. Meanwhile, in order to learn how to shoot a gun, you only need to study for 2 weeks, which surprised Sejong very much. At this moment, Sejong considered that in 2 weeks a person could hardly learn to hold a bow correctly, and in order to learn to shoot accurately, a warrior would have to spend more than a year on training. At the same moment, Li Hyang said that he had now shown the shooting skills of those warriors who had trained for 2 weeks, and now he wanted to show what could be learned over a longer period of training. At this point, several warriors came out who had been learning to shoot a gun for more than 2 months. After just a couple of seconds, experienced and trained shooters prepared to fire their weapons. As soon as Li Hyang gave the soldiers the order to shoot, all the soldiers fired several shots at once. After the soldiers ran out of shells, Li Hyang calculated that almost all the soldiers were able to successfully hit the target. being at a distance of 40 meters from the target. At this point, military officials calculated that if they were shooting at that distance with a bow, only 3 out of 10 archers would be able to hit the target at that distance. Afterwards, Sejong liked the way these experienced marksmen showed off their gun shooting skills. Then Li Hyang told Sejong that even an ordinary person, after 2 months of practice shooting with a gun, could compare with experienced archers in accuracy and speed of fire. After this, Sejong arrived, carrying with him a large cannon that had all the best features of the first 2 prototype firearms. As soon as military officials saw the 3rd prototype firearm, they decided that it was just a regular gun. Sejong became interested in what this gun fired, to which Sejong said that this firearm uses special buckshot as projectiles, which are used in shotguns. Soon Sejong prepared to fire the 3rd gun, and at the moment of the shot there was a very loud sound, from which one could easily damage one's hearing and go deaf. The force of the projectile was so strong that this gun easily destroyed one of the targets. Sejong was amazed at the force of the shot, and he decided that with such a weapon, Joseon could become the strongest state. Li Hyang was very pleased to hear such praiseworthy words from his father about his invention. Meanwhile, one of Wang Xin's ambassadors arrived to his ruler to inform him that the people of Joseon had already mastered various types of firearms. At first, the ambassador wanted to tell his spy to copy the drawings of the firearm, to which Wang Xin said that they were unlikely to be able to obtain accurate drawings of such a complex device. Wang Xin then decided that the best way to understand the mechanics of the firearm would be to get his hands on one of the prototypes and further study its operation. After demonstrating the new type of weapon, Sejong told Sejong that despite all the advantages of firearms, they might have problems mass-producing them. Sejong also told Sejong that he had received a letter from the Ming Empire, in which the emperor expressed his concern about the appearance of a completely new invention in Joseon. Also in this letter, the emperor demanded that samples of the invention of Li Hyang and Sejong be sent to him to the Ming Empire as a sign of his respect, and Sejong believed that the emperor wanted to receive their new weapon. At this point, Sejong became interested in how the Ming dynasty emperor knew about their invention, and he decided that if he only demanded samples, then we could be talking about any other invention of theirs except weapons. Sejong thought that this might be the case, but if they sent samples of another invention and they later found out about their weapons, it could shake the relationship between Joseon and the Ming Empire. Then Sejong believed that the emperor had specifically chosen these words in his letter in order to, in any case, try to obtain their weapons for further study. At this point, Sejong suggested to his father that he send Wang Xin 2,000 silver coins as tribute to avoid sending them their weapons. Sejong could not believe that Sejong was actually offering to send such a large and impressive sum to Wang Xin, since Joseon usually sends only 500 silver coins per year to the Ming Empire. However, Sejong still insisted on giving Wang Xin so many silver coins, as he believed that in the current situation this would be the most thoughtful and cunning decision. A few days later, Wang Xin learned that instead of a sample of Sejong's invention, he would receive 2,000 silver coins. Jin's ambassador said that Sejong would personally bring part of this money to the Ming Empire this year. After this, the ambassador asked Wang Xin why he still indicated in his letter only a sample of the invention, instead of directly demanding a new weapon from Sejong. Then Wang Xin said that he deliberately did not indicate the specific name of the new invention in the letter, since if Sejong had sent him something else, he would have suspected some kind of secret plan in it. Wang Xin believed that if this had happened, the Joseon government could have run into some trouble, including an increase in the amount of tribute. However, in fact, the Joseon government made a very unexpected move, and Wang Xin believed that this time Joseon would not be threatened by the Ming Empire. Wang Xin also believed that if Joseon had problems granting their requests, then they could easily take something more valuable from them. Wang Zheng believed that in this way he could easily get Sejong as a hostage, for whose ransom he could ask Joseon for almost everything he needed. Meanwhile, one of the Joseon residents named Yun He was chopping wood while his neighbor wanted to tell him about the recent news that the capital would begin collecting volunteers for military training. Then Young He told his neighbor that he was not very interested in this news, as he believed, since due to the fact that he was illiterate, he could not make out anything. Hearing all the details, Young He believed that if even the slightest mistake was made, he could easily be sent to the north. Also Young He said that if training takes place in the capital, then the capital's military leaders will train them, which creates its own certain difficulties. Besides, Young He believed that if the training took place in the capital, Then the training there would be exclusively for palace guards or warriors of the cavalry division. More young, he recalled that he did not know how to read and write, which made him feel that he would be of no use in these exercises. However, neighbor Yun he told him that no one spoke about the cavalry, and among the conditions there was nothing said about the fact that only high-ranking people were recruited there. At this moment, Yong he thought for a moment, and said that if all this was true, then he really had a chance of becoming one of these volunteers. The advertisement also said that a volunteer would only need to indicate his name, and have a strong body paired with a strong will. At this moment, one of the slave owners, who lived in the northern lands of Joseon, sent one of his slaves to the capital for training, giving him some money, food and warm clothes. Also, this slave owner told his slave that if he simply plans to run away from him, then his parents will suffer heavy punishment. Despite the inhumanity of his master, the guy was very grateful to him for allowing him to go to these capital exercises. A few months later, the day came when 1,052 volunteers from all over Joseon arrived in Nodalnaru, where present-day Noryangjin is located, for the exercise. Suyong looked at all these people and thought that he would be able to gather a little more people. Then the man who stood behind Suyong told him that these simply do not yet know what awaits them during their exercises. From this, Suyong concluded that among all these volunteers there were quite a few naive people who expected some kind of privileges, and he believed that they would have to experience a lot and learn a lot. However, at this moment, Suyong was wondering why this man suddenly decided to hide behind him. It was Ansong, who was formerly a civil servant calligrapher, whom Sejong appointed as a military advisor. Ansong was very scared, as he was afraid of screwing up in front of Suyong and Sejong, to which Suyong told him that if Sejong appointed him to this position, then he would definitely handle his new responsibilities. After this, Suyong decided that there was no point in postponing his plans, and he decided that it was time for him to go out in front of the volunteers and give a speech to them. First, Suyong came out in front of the volunteers, greeted them, and introduced himself to them as their coach. Suyong also told the volunteers that, by order of King Sejong, he would personally train them in the coming months and teach them military skills. Suyong also wanted to teach volunteers to master new methods and weapons for combat, which are very different from what the current royal troops can now do and possess. However, before the training began, Suyong wanted to conduct a small series of tasks through which he could determine those who would continue the training, while the rest would be considered unfit. Suyong recruits was to run from Nodalnaru to Tanshin. Before the test began, Suyong explained to the recruits that if they were able to get to this place on their own, then their legs should be strong enough to withstand this entire difficult journey. Also, Suyong told the recruits that the legs are an extremely important part of any soldier, and that a man must have exceptionally strong and resilient legs. After a short introduction, Suyong told the recruits that they must run from Nodalnaru to Tanshin, following their teacher, who will guide them. Soon, some of the recruits prepared for the test, while some of them did not understand the seriousness of the test. Once all the recruits were ready for the test, Suyong told them to start running to Tanshin as soon as possible. Also during the test, Suyong told the recruits that if they felt that they could not handle this test, then it would be better for them to withdraw from the race so that the other recruits would not accidentally trample them. After some time, 649 recruits failed the first test, while the remaining 403 recruits successfully made it to Tanshin. After the first test, Suyong told the recruits that during their next test they must show their body's strength and resilience. First, recruits will need to perform the bench press a certain number of times with a certain weight. The next exercise for recruits will be barbell squats and deadlifts, during which the weight of the barbell will be equal to 20% of their own body weight. To better understand which of the recruits would be better able to cope with the test, Suyong ordered them to approach one at a time and perform all these exercises in turn. The first to approach the barbell was a slightly thin and fit man who was about to lift the barbell. One of the assistants told the man that if he felt like he couldn't stay on his feet, he should just keep trying. The man tried his best to lift this barbell, but the barbell was too heavy for him, causing him to immediately fall to the ground. Suyong looked at this man and thought that his assistants were well prepared for the tests, and therefore the recruits would be avoided from being injured during the tests. 182 recruits failed the second test, and only 221 recruits remained, with whom Suyong went to Mount Namhansan, where a training camp for recruits was built. A lot of time had passed since the start of the tests, and therefore the remaining recruits had to climb the mountain in the evening, and at that time it was very cold on the mountain. Due to extreme fatigue and low air temperatures, many recruits found it very difficult to climb the mountain. While climbing the mountain, one of the recruits turned to one of his partners to ask him how he felt in such harsh conditions. However, this partner looked very cheerful and calm, and it seemed to him that these tests were too easy for him, and that he could run even further and lift even more weight. Soon Suyang and the remaining recruits arrived at the Namhansansiang fortress, on the territory of which there was a training camp where the recruits would train. Upon arrival at the fortress, Suyang told the recruits that the structure was designed to repel enemy attacks and other unforeseen threats that might threaten Joseon. After this, Suyang suggested that the recruits go wash and go to dinner, to which one of the recruits asked Suyang if such things were not some kind of luxury for them. In response to this, Suyang told the recruit that while they were undergoing training, they could use the local bathhouse at least every day to wash and clean themselves up. Hearing this, the recruits were very happy, and they immediately began to thank Suyang for his concern for them. After this, Suyang told the recruits that tomorrow morning he would personally talk with each of them, and today they could calmly go to rest, after which the soldiers went to wash, have dinner and rest. The next morning, Suyang interviewed each of the new recruits to better understand their goals and motivations for training with the others. Suyang had almost finished interviewing the recruits, and he only had 2 more recruits left to talk to. The first to visit Suyang was Hong San, who was a slave in Gangwon-do, and he believed that this young man had come here to change his current situation. When Suyang asked Hong San what exactly brought him here, Hong San said that if he enlisted in the military, his master would free his parents. Hong San also told Suyang that he began training as a child to free his parents from slavery, making every effort to express all his gratitude and respect to them. Suyang looked at Hong San and thought that even with such a small weight and height, he must have tried his best to become stronger. Suyang told Hong San that the training during the exercise would not be easy, but if he tried hard, he could easily complete it, after which Hong San thanked Suyang and left his office. Suyang had only one interview left to conduct, and he asked this recruit to come see him. However, Suyang was horrified when he learned that this latest recruit was none other than Hong Yun-song. In Korea, Hong Yun-song was known not just as an ordinary butcher, but as a real monster who never spared his enemies and did not feel any pity for them. Going into Suyang's office, Yun-song told Suyang that he was born in Hon, that he had a strong body and a poor family, which is why he was unable to learn horse riding. However, despite his background and status, Yun-sung still wanted to succeed, and so he decided to become one of the recruits. At this moment, Suyang believed that now he had a unique opportunity to rewrite the history of young Yun-sung, making him a strong and brave warrior. Suyang then told Yun-sung that a true leader should lead his army without showing any cruelty, since he believed that a leader does not have to beat and abuse his subordinates. However, Yun-sung somewhat disagreed with Suyang's statement, and then he asked him why warriors are needed in the world if they do not use cruel and extreme measures. Instead of giving Yun-sung a clear answer, Suyang told him that he would make sure to explain this to all the students during the training, after which he ended his interview with Yun-sung. When Yun-sung left the office, Suyang thought that Sejong was also very stubborn at one time, and that he still managed to take the right path, and he hoped that such problems would not arise with Yun-sung. After the interview, Suyang began training his recruits to maintain the correct formation position. Many recruits thought that this kind of training was very strange, and at first glance it did not give them any skills. However, Yun-sung told the other recruits that this training will sharpen their teamwork skills, since in real combat, orders must be carried out quickly and unconditionally. In addition to combat training, Suyang was going to teach the recruits writing, since he wanted communication between the troops to be carried out through writing. During writing training, recruits made every effort to not only understand what was written in their text, but also to be able to write various hieroglyphs on their own. One of Suyang's assistants, who taught writing to new recruits, noticed how one of their soldiers had already begun to successfully read and write. This student was Yun-sung, who claimed that writing was easy for him. At this moment, Suyang also turned his attention to Yun-sung's progress and thought that if he had any problems with him, he would have to take appropriate measures. However, now Suyang saw that he was not having any problems with Yun-sung yet, and he believed that if he continued to try so hard, he could become one of the first instructors. After writing lessons and a few extra drills, the recruits were allowed to take a break from training. While the rest of the recruits decided to play Go, Hong San decided to take a short walk around the training camp. The other recruits asked Hong San to play with them, but Hong San said that he wanted to get some fresh air. However, the recruits did not understand why Hong San decided to take an extra walk around the camp instead of resting, after which Hong San left the rest of the recruits and went for a walk. Walking outside, Hong San thought about his past and how his owner allowed him to go to these military exercises and about the last time he saw his parents. The day Hong San's father learned that his son was going to military training, he gave him some things and told him that this was his only chance to earn money and free himself from the shackles of slavery. Hong San's father also told him that he shouldn't worry about them and that he should just run away. But Hong Sang firmly insisted that he would free him and his mother. At this moment, Hong San was also thinking about whether his parents were still alive and whether he would ever see them again. Suddenly Hong Sna turned his attention to the tent, from which the light always burned until nightfall. Curiosity got the better of Hong San, and he decided to find out what was going on in this tent, that the light was constantly on there. Moving the curtain of the tent, Hong San saw Ma Il training with some strange devices that looked very similar to large bowling pins. A few seconds later, Ma Il saw Hong San looking at him, and he told him to leave if he came here just to watch him, which scared Hong San a little. At this moment, Hong San looked at one of the walls of the tent and saw that on this wall there were several more devices of different sizes, which were very similar to the ones Ma Il was holding. After this, Hong Song asked Ma Il what his rank was, to which Ma Il said that he was a junior assistant to the commander-in-chief of the 8th rank. At this moment, Hong San turned to Ma Il as a junior assistant and asked him why he needed those big batons he was just twirling. However, before answering, Ma Il handed this club to Hong San and told him that he could explain everything to him and familiarize him with this device, which at first somewhat frightened Hong San. Then Ma Il told Hong San that this device is called Heavenly Condescension, which is used to teach a warrior how to properly wield his weapon. However, this baton was so large and heavy that Hong San could not only rotate it, but even hold it in his hands. After a couple of seconds, Hong San said that he wanted to personally look into the eyes of the person who came up with this training device. In response to this, Ma Il told Hong San that it was Mr. Suyang who developed these devices to make it much easier for recruits to master the skills of using their weapons. Ma Il also told Hong San that there are several types of such batons, the weight, size and shape of which depend on what kind of weapon the recruit wants to learn to wield. Hong San was afraid that Ma Il would now force him to try all types of these clubs, and he said that he wanted to become a shield bearer, hoping that in this case Ma Il would leave him behind with his clubs. However, at the same second, Ma Il took out the heaviest instrument, which imitated a battle shield and which had approximately the same weight. At this point, Hong San began to apologize to Ma Il for the fact that he still did not understand what types of melee weapons the recruits would have to wield. At first, Hong San wanted to escape from Ma Il's tent as quickly as possible, but at that same moment Ma Il stood in front of the exit of their tent and told Hong San that now he would not let him go so easily. Ma Il told Hong San that since they started the topic of shield training, they should try to learn how to use it. This news greatly upset Hong San, as he realized that he was now stuck in this tent with Ma Il for a long time. As night approached, Ma Il finished training Hong San, and he decided that now he could go back to camp and go to bed. At this moment, Hong San was very exhausted and tired, and he felt that if things continued like this, he was unlikely to be able to survive all this training. On the way to the camp, Hong San saw Yun Sung in front of him, who was also awake in the camp. Hong San found Yun Sung outside the camp a bit suspicious and decided to ask him what he was doing here. A blood-stained Yun Sung told Hong Sang that he was tired of repeating these simple exercises that they do during training, and he decided to do a little training on his own and alone.